Chapter 241 _ They are already my people. The magic triangle, the horror bark. The air is full of fog, making it impossible to grasp the full picture of the environment here. It can only be seen vaguely about 10 meters away from the coast and look forward to see that this is a huge and terrifying sailboat. Location on the shore. A warship stops here. On board. Lucci and the other 6 frowned. Obanashi counted the population. 1, 2, 3. Stop counting. Lucci directly interrupted Owl's words. His face was gloomy, and he said bluntly, "We are here, without Khalifa, only she is gone." In the sea. Kaku's injury has recovered slightly, but his face is still pale, asked tentatively. "I don't know, but we searched all over this sea area and couldn't find a trace of Khalifa. If it wasn't for her death, it would only prove another point." Lucci pondered for a moment, and said in a deep voice. "What?" Everyone looked at Lucci and asked. Hearing this, Lucci looked at the gloomy environment of the terrifying bark ahead, his voice hoarse. "She was taken away by Liang." "Impossible." Everyone was shocked and lost their voices. "Who is Liang? Why did he take Khalifa away? This doesn't make sense at all." Everyone could not understand the specific reason why Liang did this. "Apart from this, I can't get along with the second answer. Of course, there is another point that she was killed by monsters in the sea. This result is even more tragic." Lucci's face was low and he said directly. The 6 fell into silence. If it was as Lucci guessed, what would they do? To take back Khalifa. This is basically impossible. Who can steal someone from Liang? Just kidding, people who don't want to die dare not act wild in front of Liang. Sudden. On the shipboard, a man in black clothes and a black hat appeared. His curly blonde hair was very conspicuous. "Well, what are you doing here?" Lucci frowned, stared at Sabo in front of him, and asked. "The other 5 have launched an offensive posture, ready to attack at any time. Don't be nervous." Sabo waved his hand quickly and said slowly, "I'm here just to ask you guys, have you seen the girl who was with me before? Is she gone too?" Gabra couldn't hold back his temper and blurted out, his whole face was full of astonishment. "What, could it be that some of you are missing?" Sabo raised his brows, a little surprised. He just came to ask about the situation, but he didn't expect that he could still get this information. "Indeed." Lucci stepped forward and looked at Sabo without any timidity, and said bluntly, "We have lost a person here. I have searched the nearby sea area and couldn't find her. That beautiful woman." Sabo looked at it and quickly came to a conclusion. "That's right, it's her. It's all women who disappeared, so I have a bold guess in my heart. However, even if this guess is true, we can't do anything about it." After hearing Sabo's words, Lucci was even more sure of his guess. Women are missing for no reason. Even if they were killed by the monsters in the sea, it would not be so coincidental. It was 2 women who were killed. In this world, there are not many coincidences. Many things are not coincidences, but are deliberately done by some people, but no one notices them. "What guess?" Sabo asked, holding the iron pipe. Chapter 241 _ They are already my people. Sabo asked, holding the iron pipe. He didn't find Kurla, but found his weapon instead. Both of them were taken away by Liang. Lucci's tone became heavier and he said, "Well." Sabo's pupils shrank, looking at Lucci, thinking about whether the other party's words are true. He couldn't believe Lucci's words all of a sudden, but this possibility really had a chance. It's just, why did Liang take 2 women away? Thinking of this, Sabo felt extremely depressed. Even if he knew that the guess was true, there was nothing he could do. Liang's strength is too terrifying, far from what he can compete with himself. Immediately afterwards, Sabo took a deep breath, calmed down, and asked, "What are you going to do?" "How?" Lucci was asked, his expression was a little dull. "Kaku, Gabra and others were also taken aback for a moment. They never thought about this issue at all. If they are taken away by Liang, what else can they do? What about you? What are you going to do? Lu Qi threw the question back to Sabo and asked. What to do? This is a very deep question. Sabo's eyes fell into thought, and he whispered. At this time, a footstep sounded from the darkness ahead. Well, everyone looked around and saw figures in the dark. Liang's figure gradually appeared in the eyes of everyone, with a gentle smile, and said, Everyone, how are you? I'm very relieved to see your safe appearance. Liang. Lu Qi and the others were in heavy hearts and stared at Liang. Mr. Liang, I don't know, have you seen Kurla? Although Sabo was under a lot of pressure, he still managed to keep a calm mind and asked. Kurla. Liang laughed and said truthfully, Of course, I took them away. Now, they will be served in the castle. So, you don't have to worry about them. As for you, leave here as soon as possible. 0. But. Sabo gritted his teeth and said hastily. But before he could finish his words, Liang interrupted. Before that, let me share one thing with you. At the beginning, I needed them to work for me for 3 days to repay the berry you owe. Quote. But what happened next was beyond my expectations. They escaped from the castle without authorization and were attacked by 3-headed dogs. At the last critical moment, I showed up and saved them. Therefore, you can think that the former ones who belonged to the organization are dead. Now they belong to me. They are already my people. Liang looked at the people in front of him and smiled lightly. Sabo's face became heavier and his eyes rolled, thinking about how to deal with this matter. Hard break. His strength is far from enough. In addition to Sabo's expression, Lu Qi and the others were also very heavy. But fortunately, they were in a slightly better mood than Sabo. Mr. Liang, what you do has lost your reputation. Detaining 2 weak women doesn't seem like a move by someone with such a high status as you. Sabo took a deep breath and said. Am I doing something wrong? But I think it's normal. Liang waved his hand and walked to the position of the warship step by step. As he approached, on the boat, Lu Qi and others were tense and uneasy. Similarly, Sabo was no exception, his back was wet with cold sweat and nervous. Chapter 242-Where to go back and forth. This. Sabo's mouth moved slightly, he wanted to speak, but after seeing the situation, he didn't dare to say a word. The terrifying coercion emanating from Liang shrouded everyone's shoulders. The heavy pressure is unbearable. Lu Qi and the other group of 6 people, their feet are weak, if it is not for the fence supporting the boat board, I am afraid that they will already be kneeling on the ground. If you have no opinion, then leave here. As for Kurla and Khalifa, I will take good care of them, so don't worry. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. But his words could not convince Sabo and others. Bai caught up with his partner, how could he leave here so easily? I don't believe that Kurla was willing and asked him to confront me in person. Sabo frowned, gritted his teeth, and said firmly. Very courageous. 433. Liang glanced at Sabo approvingly and said with a faint smile, but, so what? Finished talking. With a wave of his hand, a terrifying force swept away. Sabo's pupils shrank, holding an iron pipe, using his armament color domineering, to attack the front abruptly. Boom. A loud bang. Sabo was like a kite with a broken string, flying upside down more than 10 meters, vomiting blood, and submerged into the sea. The scene was unusually silent. Lu Qi and the others didn't dare to say a word, their throats were dry, and so far, they still couldn't come back to their senses. The power of that moment made them tremble. So horrible. That power is definitely not something they can shake. Once they act rashly, they will be completely obliterated in this world. Immediately, Liang's eyes turned, stopped on Lu Qi and the others, and said with a smile, so, are you guys the same as him? No. Lu Qi's face was pale, and he hurriedly shook his head and said, "It's not that he doesn't want to save Khalifa, it's that he can't save Khalifa at all. The enemy in front of him is too strong for him to deal with. If I had known this earlier, this task should not have been carried out. Now that everything is over, there is no regret medicine in the world." When they started performing this task, they were destined to be noticed by Liang, and then there would be a head-on collision. If not, then leave. Liang's face was expressionless, his momentum slightly restrained, and said, Here, leave." Lu Qi's lips were pale, and he said with difficulty, "This is also a helpless move. If they do not leave, they will be attacked by Liang." They didn't think that they could still survive under Liang's attack. Kaku, Gabra and others did not object, bowed their heads and remained silent. They wanted to speak, but couldn't find any reason or strength to support them. If they make Liang unhappy in front of them, then they are finished. Very clever. Liang smiled and said, "You don't have to feel inconvenience. Go back to the naval headquarters, or the world government will inform them truthfully. Just say, 'People, I left them.'" Hearing this, Lu Qi and the others were heartbroken and nodded. Only Liang has such courage. There are not many people who dare to challenge the world government head-on. After the challenge, there is only one person who can live in this sea area with integrity. Liang is the only one. Chapter 242 Where to go back and forth. There are not many people who dare to challenge the world government head-on. After the challenge, there is only one person who can live in this sea area with integrity. Liang is the only one. The rest of the Revolutionary Army and others have all been suppressed by the world government like rats crossing the street, and they have to hide in the dark and act in the dark, rather than being open to the public. In this case, the world government will completely wipe out the Revolutionary Army. Let's go. Lu Qi took a deep breath, waved his hand, and shouted. The warship gradually set sail, and gradually left Liang's sight with the current. A figure appeared on the sea. Sabo was in a state of embarrassment. There was still a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth, his golden hair was infected by the sea water, and his whole body was wet. He stared at Liang on the shore, gritted his teeth, full of unwillingness. But he still kept his head calm, and he also understood that he was no threat to Liang at all. Even if he continued to stay here, it would not help. You can only go back and inform the leader. Sabo's mouth was bitter, he shook his head and sighed, saying. In the sight of Liang on the shore, Sabo gradually left. He went to find the ship left by the Revolutionary Army here, and was going to return to the headquarters to inform the leader to solve the matter. What happened right now was beyond his ability to handle. Watching everyone leave gradually, Liang withdrew his gaze, the corners of his mouth curled slightly, and said with a smile, "Wherever you came from, go back to where you came from. But, since you are here, naturally you have to leave something behind. And what you have left are your companions." He moved his footsteps and gradually disappeared into the dark forest. Stepping on the muddy soil under his feet, his steps seemed a little heavy. At the same time, he saw that the domineering arrogance spread to the extreme, shrouded in the shore where he was standing just now. Sure enough, no trace of the presence of any personnel was noticed. Those people are really gone, not just pretending. Lu Qi and others were driving the warship, obviously they really wanted to leave here. The same is true for Sabo. This group of people was well prepared when they came, but when they left behind a partner who stayed with the terror bark forever. When he returned to the castle, Liang heard the laughter of the girls. The two women of Perona and Zaluria Palace, plus Khalifa and Kurla, were simply four people from completely different camps, but at this moment they gathered together to laugh, which was unbelievable. Perona as a pirate, Zaluria Palace as a dragon, Khalifa as an agent of the world government, and Kurla as a revolutionary army. This definitely belongs to the four camps. I have to say, it was really a coincidence that they were all brought together. Crunch. As soon as the door was opened, Liang saw that on the sofa in the living room, the four girls were smiling and dressed casually, revealing their pure white skin. The four beauties gathered together, dressed in such simple clothes, and all that caught the eye was a piece of white tiger, which made Liang a little unable to see it. Sir. Shalulia Palace was the first to discover Liang. Her face turned slightly red, and she whispered 2.3. What are you talking about? Liang walked over with a smile and sat in the middle, with his left arm around Shalulia Palace, his right hand holding Khalifa's slender waist, leaning back on the sofa, and asked. No, nothing. Perona's ears were all red, she said. It seems that you are talking about some very mature issues, so let me discuss it too. Liang's eyes flickered, and after seeing Perona's expression, he knew it naturally. Cough, me, I'll go first. Kurla's face was flushed, and she hurriedly stood up, ready to leave. Don't worry. Liang stretched out his hand to grab Kurla and pulled the latter back. He said with a smile, seeing me back, why did the topic end? This is not a good habit. We are all family, nothing. Hard to say. Quote. Chapter 243_Extraordinary Battle. We were talking about that. Khalifa blushed and whispered, like a mosquito. Which thing? Liang leaned against Khalifa's ear and blew lightly. Suddenly, Khalifa's body was weak and fell on Liang's shoulders, spitting like blue. Her whole face was bright red, and her limbs were weak. That's how it feels when you just start with your lord. Perona bit her pink lips. It was really hard to be ashamed. The scale of your conversation is really big. Liang was stunned, but he didn't expect that these four little girls would dare to talk so deeply. However, I like. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, his eyes fixed on Kurla and Khalifa, and he said with a smile, so, you two, do you want to try it? I'll just forget it. Kurla was a little flustered, and quickly waved her hand and said. Come together. Liang smiled and grabbed Kurla directly. Throughout the castle, there were bursts of women's exclamations. Liang was in the empty living room, directly killing the quartet. Now. Inside the horror bark, the only surviving living person is Hogbark. This guy, after Moonlight Moria left, fell directly into his own experiment, and even spent his mealtime in the experiment. Liang doesn't even know what this guy is researching, so hard and obsessed. In an empty hall. Khalifa, you can't run. Liang looked at Khalifa and said with a smile. The four girls all ran away, and Khalifa was left alone, with a sprained foot, and she couldn't run. She blushed and sat on the sofa with her head down, without saying a word. But her face has also betrayed her mood swings. In the corner position. Perona, Zaluria Palace, and Kurla looked at the scene in the living room and couldn't help but communicate with each other. You said, what will happen next? Kurla asked with some doubts. Hearing this, Perona and Zaluria Palace looked at Kurla with the eyes of a fool, and said angrily, is there a need to ask this? What's the matter? Am I asking the wrong thing? Kurla scratched her head, still puzzled. These things cannot be explained in words. At the moment, Perona and Zaluria Palace did not have too much explanation. Perona said with a meaningful smile, then you have to look carefully, the next picture, you will have to experience it in the future, which is indispensable. Huh, what exactly is that? Kurla exclaimed, her eyes focused on the front. The scene she saw really made her pretty face blushed. Both Leon and Khalifa have already done these things. She wanted to close her eyes, but she couldn't help opening them. Looking at the picture in front of her, she felt uneasy, and a strange emotion appeared in her heart, which was indescribable. Don't close your eyes. Perona said with a meaningful smile. I won't close my eyes. Kurla's face was ruddy, and she said firmly. Seeing the picture in front of her, she felt very blushing in her heart. Actually, they all made such an intimate action. A few minutes later. Why, your lord isn't finished yet. Karola's pretty face blushed half the sky and said. My lord is full of energy, which is naturally different from ordinary people. This is Lord Liang, so it will naturally be different from ordinary people. What's so strange about this? Chapter 243 _ An extraordinary battle. My lord is full of energy, which is naturally different from ordinary people. This is Lord Liang, so it will naturally be different from ordinary people. What's so strange about this? Perona rolled her eyes and said bluntly. But Kurla was still stunned. Seeing Khalifa's weak appearance, she felt nervous and uneasy in her heart. It seems to be painful. But why is there still some excitement on Khalifa's face? This was something that Kurla couldn't understand. She clearly screamed in pain, but her expression didn't show any pain in it. Instead, it was a bit happy. Kurla took a deep breath and calmed down. Looking at the picture in front of her, her pretty face was red and the blood couldn't be dissipated, and her neck was all red. After all this time, can Khalifa really hold on? Kurla couldn't help but worry. It was really terrible. She has a psychological shadow over these things. Don't hide. Suddenly, a voice appeared. Kurla was startled, only to see that Liang was already standing in front of her, and the most conspicuous position was appearing in her eyes. With a swish, Kurla's blood went straight to her forehead. She stared at Liang in a daze, and before she had time to exclaim, she was directly caught by Liang. This day, in the castle, dogs and cats were restless, and there were bursts of intriguing sounds. Not only Khalifa, but also Kurla, have been opened, and felt a feeling that has never been experienced in this life. A 1-on-4 fight. In the end, Liang won. The 4 women were defeated, and each fell on the sofa, their limbs weak and unable to move. And Liang, still full of energy, blushing, without any sense of fatigue. See. The 4 girls could only secretly call monsters, and when they saw Liang approaching, they could not help shrinking, for fear of fighting again. That won't do. Liang shook his head and said slowly. He wasn't serious yet, and he fell down. Then, despite Khalifa's objection, he fought again. From the battle in the hall to the location of the corridor. Hearing this sound, Kurla shivered all over, and felt a chill in her heart. She was still a little stinging, and she couldn't even imagine that scene. My mother. Khalifa's voice came from Kurla's ear, and the corners of her mouth trembled. She tried to stand up, but she didn't have the strength. On the sofa, the scarlet was very dazzling. For a long time, Khalifa still came back, but, in Kurla's view, Khalifa simply didn't want to be too embarrassed, and suddenly lay on the sofa, blushing and motionless. If it wasn't for the ups and downs of breathing, she would think that the other party would be dead from exhaustion, right? Next, Kurla saw an even more terrifying picture. Liang came back again, targeting Perona. The petite and lovely Perona swayed her hands constantly, looking at Kurla with a hopeless expression, and said in a low voice, Kurla, you can't escape. Kurla's scalp went numb. In other words, is it so terrifying? She felt terrified when she heard it. Immediately after Perona, there is Zaluria Palace. What, doesn't this guy Liang know that he is tired? If Liang knew what Kurla had said, that would be the only answer. Sorry, I don't know how tired I am. At the end of Zaluria Palace, it was Kurla's turn. Fortunately, she recovered a lot of injury, and was able to barely resist Liang's attack. It's just that as time passed, her defense also plummeted, and Liang's fierce attack made her unable to get out of the attack, and could only passively endure it. Chapter 244 _ Go to the Daughter Island. Great Fairway. Isle of White Earth, Baldigo. Flying sand and rocks, a desert, very desolate, looks like an abandoned island. But in fact, here is the base of the Revolutionary Army. In an office. Drago hung up the phone bug, his eyelids lowered slightly. The phone call just now caught him off guard. The opposite was a call from Sabo, and the announcement was really unbelievable. Kurla was actually trapped in the horror bark. Li Ang. Drago raised his brows, the corners of his mouth moved slightly, and he whispered. Kurla was caught by Li Ang, which made him feel a little depressed and heavy. To save Kurla. I'm afraid, he still doesn't have this ability. Even if he uses the power of the Revolutionary Army, he will have to spend a heavy price of 400 inches to save Kurla. Even as a leader, he could not afford such a price. The Revolutionary Army will not use such a huge force in order to save one person. Therefore, when Sabo passed the news back, it was already doomed, and Drago would not act rashly, but would only wait and see. Neither he nor the rest of the Revolutionary Army would provoke such a terrifying figure as Liang for the sake of Kurla. Although, he was also very aggrieved, but it was helpless. Fortunately, one of the people from the world government has also been caught. If the world government takes action against Liang, then I can take advantage of it. Drago's eyes flickered, thinking to himself. The collision between the world government and Liang was the scene he most liked to see. At that time, they can use Liang's slack opportunity to rescue Kurla. It's just that all of this has to be done by the world government first. Those guys are not fuel-efficient lamps. Drago immediately called a young man and instructed, during this time, pay close attention to every move of the world government and the Navy headquarters. If there is any trouble, come back and report to me immediately. Remember, even if it's the slightest movement, you have to tell me the truth. Don't think that the matter is too small, so you can hide it. Yes. After the young man nodded, he left the office. Here, there is only Dorag left, frowning, looking at the map on the table, wondering what he is thinking. The Revolutionary Army wants to fight Liang head-on. This is definitely not what Drago wants to see, and he will never allow such a thing to happen. Liang's strength is known to everyone in the ocean. If the Revolutionary Army wants to compete with Liang, it has to call back all the hidden forces in the rest of the sea, and then make a big move to defeat Liang. But, it's just a defeat. If you want to kill Liang, the strength of the Revolutionary Army is still not enough. Unless, with the cooperation of the world government, perhaps, it is possible to encircle and suppress Liang. But this possibility is almost non-existent. Holy Land, Mary Joa. In a splendid palace. The 5 old stars gathered together, and fell into silence just after answering the phone call from Lucci. Chapter 244-Go to the Daughter Island. The 5 old stars gathered together, and fell into silence just after answering the phone call from Lucci. What are your thoughts? The man in the kimono with the knife asked. It's just the loss of one person, and I can't do anything wrong. For this person, I have a big fight with Liang. What do you think? I think it's just let it go. The strong middle-aged man with blonde hair and red complexion thought for a moment and said. At the same time, the rest of the people took their stand. Agreed, I also think that for a mere agent, there is no need to confront Liang head-on. In this way, our losses will only be greater. Indeed, and there is still a major matter to be dealt with by the Navy headquarters. Let's put Liang's words aside for the time being. No matter how outrageous things he does, we can't touch him for the time being. Especially his strength. If we don't mobilize a lot of strength, we really don't have the confidence to win him. Such a price is too painful. Finally. Man in the kimono with the knife blinked his eyes and said slowly, that is to say, now we need to wait and see what happens. Yes, according to Lucci's words. There is also a Revolutionary Army person who was also captured. We can see how the Revolutionary Army will try to rescue their comrades. The slightly obese fat man said with a meaningful smile. The Revolutionary Army should make a move. According to their consistent philosophy, they will not be presumptuous by any of their companions. Although they will not confront Liang head-on, they will definitely take measures secretly. So, during this period, we must pay close attention to every move of the Revolutionary Army. The rest, while talking, came to a conclusion. Unbeknownst to them, however, the Revolutionary Army had exactly what they thought. They all want to wait and reap the benefits of the fishermen, and no one wants to be the first to collide with Liang. This also caused the situation that both of them were silent, and there was no movement. After all, the energy that Liang brought was really terrifying. The strength of one person is so tyrannical that the Revolutionary Army and the world government are terrified. It is conceivable that in this sea, who else can suppress Liang? 4 emperors, Chiwahai. These people, even with full firepower, may not be able to compete with Liang. Kaido, who is known as the strongest creature in the sea, land and air, in front of Liang, I'm afraid, he can't keep his undead record. Moreover, now is an eventful time. The Navy headquarters is already on standby and is preparing to send out a communication for all pirates. A major war is about to break out, and the naval headquarters is ready. The entire Marin Fando revealed a chilling air, which was extremely cold. Even the weakest Navy soldiers didn't know what happened on the bright side, but they felt the oppressive atmosphere of the Navy headquarters, and they all had some guesses and inferences in their hearts. Storm is coming. ... Magic triangle. Here, as always, the fog is haunted, and the field of view is only 3.8 at most, which can support a distance of 5 meters. 5 meters away, everything you see is dim. Abandoned ships drifted on the sea, and there were bones that had long been corroded by insects. In this darkness, they looked hideous and terrifying. Horror bark, sure. Liang looked at the 4 daughters in front of him and said with a smile, "This time, are you ready to go to Daughter Island?" Everyone. Yeah. The 4 women nodded at the same time, their pretty faces blushing. Among them, the 2 girls, Kurla and Khalifa, were very different when they walked. Come down all day yesterday, so that their injury is not too serious. The 2 women of Zaluria Palace and Perona are quite normal. Although there are some vague pain points, they are countless times better than the people who have just experienced the 2 times that Kurla and Khalifa have just experienced. Chapter 245 _ Come on, stop. Go. Liang waved his hand, and with a smile, stepped out and stepped onto a boat. Immediately after, the 4 women, Perona, Zalulia Palace, Khalifa, and Kurla, landed on the ship one after another. This is a temporary ship. It looks ordinary, and there is nothing too brilliant. But what should be there is still there. The rooms, halls, etc., are all the same. Liang, who has extreme sailing skills, sails easily, and after specifying the direction, he can let the ship sail on the sea. He took the 4 daughters into the room, lay on the sofa, chatting and laughing. The arrogance of seeing and hearing spread to the extreme, shrouded in the ship within a few hundred meters. Liang would immediately notice any disturbances. Therefore, this ship does not need anyone to observe the waves of the sea at all times. Daughter Island. Perona showed a hint of curiosity and smiled. An island, all organized by women, are you curious and want to see it? Liang put his right hand around Khalifa's slender waist, lying on the sofa, and said, "Sir, how did you know if you haven't been there?" Kurla looked at Liang suspiciously. 25. As the contact deepened, she felt Liang's mystery more and more. It was like a fog. The more she tried to clear the fog, the deeper she fell, and in the end, even she lost her sense of direction. "Guess," Liang said with a smile. Hearing this, Kurla couldn't help rolling her eyes, knowing that this was Liang's perfunctory answer. However, she didn't care too much. The time at sea is very boring, but accompanied by 4 charming beauties, Liang feels that time passes quickly, and he can enjoy the happiness of his family every day, and the days should not be too moist. Days like this are envious of others. Soon, the ship left the magic triangle. The sun shone down, finally letting Liang and others feel the warm light. On board, the 4 girls were wearing simple white clothes, revealing their fragrant shoulders and jade legs. When they occasionally walked, Liang could vaguely catch the trace of black. In front of Liang, the four girls dressed a lot more casually. Anyway, Liang has seen everything that should be seen, and Liang not only watched it, but also touched it over and over. Therefore, when there is only Liang, the girls will not hide some key positions. Of course. If there are outsiders, their dress will be very formal. It's been a long time since I saw the sun. Perona's fair skin was as white as snow, and she hadn't been exposed to the sun for a long time, making her tender skin look a little sickly pale. Khalifa, come and rub my shoulders for me. Liang looked at the tall and charming Khalifa, his eyes twinkled, and he smiled. Khalifa came very well behaved. She was barefoot, revealing her white insteps, her delicate little feet were somewhat pink, and a pair of white and slender long legs were perfectly displayed in front of Liang. Moreover, the 2 days in front of her were choppy and swaying when she walked, so that Liang could not wait to eat her on the spot. Khalifa walked behind Liang, rubbing her slender hand on the latter's shoulder, with a smile on her delicate face, her eyes narrowed slightly, feeling the rushing sea breeze, and rolling up her golden wavy hair. Days like this are really wonderful for her. When I was a special agent, I couldn't maintain such a relaxed state of mind at all times. A few days later. Chapter 245 come on stop. And GT, page 1/2 please click the next page to continue reading. A few days later. My lord, I seem to have seen it. Shalulia Palace pointed to the front, with a hint of pink on her face, and said quickly. Liang was lying on the chair, took off his sunglasses, and narrowed his eyes slightly. As expected. Looking at it, an island appeared in the sea area ahead, and it was still some distance away. In Liang's eyes, the scale of the island could still be seen. If nothing else, this is Daughter Island. After passing through the windless zone, we finally arrived at Daughter's Island. In the past few days, the four daughters were almost all accompanied by Liang in the war, and finally returned home after disarming, not Liang's combined enemy at all. Seeing that Daughter Island was getting closer, Liang had a hint of expectation in his heart. I couldn't eat Hancock at first, but this time, Hancock couldn't escape. Anyway, he had to eat that cute and charming little goblin this time. Get ready, we're going to log in and go ashore. Liang stood up and dressed appropriately. Although he didn't care, in the eyes of outsiders, he had to behave normally. The four girls also got dressed, and all returned to their previous appearances. Perona wore a princess dress like a little loli, but her proud figure made many women feel frustrated. Shalulia Palace is dressed in white noble clothes, showing the temperament, elegant and extravagant. And Carly La is wearing a black tights, which perfectly outlines her mature devil figure. A pair of straight and slender long legs are also wearing black fishnet socks, which is simply charming. Kurla is much simpler, dressed like a little sister next door, youthful, cute and charming. The beautiful eyes of the four girls watched the islands in front of them approaching, with a look of anticipation. None of them had a good experience of the days of traveling on the sea. Only by following Liang's side can they drift on the sea carefree. Not aware of the patrolling team. Liang was a little surprised, glanced at the surrounding sea area, and whispered to himself. 933 is naturally patrolling around Daughter Island, but he never saw it from beginning to end. However, for these little episodes, he will not take it to heart. All in all, as long as you reach Daughter's Island smoothly, that's enough. The ship drifted to the position of Daughter's Island with the current. Finally, the boat came to a position on the shore. Liang jumped up and brought the girls to the ground on the shore. In front of. This is a lush forest, and it is impossible to see the end at a glance, and it is impossible to see what kind of decoration and buildings are in the area outside the forest. Come on, let's find Hancock. The corners of Liang's mouth twitched slightly, and he smiled. Hancock. The four girls were all puzzled. She, the Emperor of Daughter's Island. Liang said with a smile on his face. Emperor, what an unusual identity. The girls were a little surprised, but not too shocked. Even the Tianlong people have become Liang's women, what else is impossible? From their point of view, the master Liang in their minds is simply omnipotent. Someone is coming. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and reminded. With his words just fell. A group of women walked out of the forest, holding bows and arrows, looking vigilant, shouting, "Whoever comes, stop." Chapter 246-Presumptuous. Who are you? Why did you enter our daughter's island without authorization? A mature woman in purple clothes came out, looked at Liang and the other 5, frowned, and scolded with a bad face. Her name is Gamma, and she is the captain of the patrol team in this area. Please help me inform Hancock. Just say, Liang is here. Liang smiled and said slowly. You are a man. Gamma became even more nervous, staring at Liang, and said, Our daughter island has been forbidden for men to enter for generations. No matter what status you are, as long as you are a man, you cannot enter here. Speaking of which, as long as you help to report it, it's enough. Why waste your time here with me? Go and let us know. Liang waved his hand and laughed. This so-called ban on entry of men is only for ordinary people. Under Hancock's order, Liang can still enter Daughter Island at will. Please exit the Daughter Island. Gamma was unmoved, holding a bow and arrow, aimed at Liang, said. The sharp arrow aimed at Liang's head. If Liang makes a slight change, she will immediately shoot arrows to kill Liang, and she will show no mercy. This is the specific reason why Daughter Island has been able to stabilize so much wine in the sea. It has never happened before. The pirates invaded Daughter Island. The women here are quite fierce. Even some men's pirates in the sea are no match for the women here. They are born with armed colors, and arrows can burst into armed colors and domineering, and can effectively deal with those with natural ability. Under their arrows, even those with natural abilities are not enough. My lord, they don't seem to welcome us. Kurla grabbed Liang's sleeve and whispered. I never thought they would be so stubborn. Liang also said with a helpless smile. If it wasn't for Hancock's reason, he would have killed these female warriors in seconds. But because of Hancock's factor, he was really embarrassed to do it directly. If these female warriors are wounded, it will be a little troublesome. Although Hancock wouldn't blame Liang, he hurt the other person when he first arrived. Even Liang himself would feel bad about it. Forget it, let's go in by ourselves. Liang's face was calm and he said slowly. Presumptuous. Gamma raised her brows and said coldly, if you take one step further, I will start. Our arrows don't have eyes. After killing you, don't blame us for being ruthless. Her words just fell, and the rest were close to 10 female warriors, and the arrows were aimed at Liang's position. The atmosphere has become very depressing. Once Liang has any changes, they will choose to attack as soon as possible. Whether it is a misunderstanding or other reasons. In any case, anyone who enters their daughter's island without authorization will be killed by them. Otherwise, if these people of unknown origin are allowed to enter the daughter island, it will be a real big trouble, and there will be endless troubles. What if I don't though? Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said lightly. Then stay here forever. Gamma has no emotion, her tone is cold, and her murderous aura is strong. Really? Liang laughed dumbly and said sternly, but I see, you people can't keep me. Insanity. Gamma's arrow was always pointed at Liang's position, and said coldly. She is not joking, but very serious. Outsider, she has the right to kill each other. Chapter 246-Presumptuous. Outsider, she has the right to kill each other. A large part of the piece of Daughter's Island is guarded by their patrol teams. Woman, don't be too impulsive. Let you go back and report it, and it won't eat you, will it? There is no loss. Why do you have to have friction with me? Liang moved his footsteps and took the first step forward. Call out. An arrow pierced the air. The arrow slammed towards Liang's forehead, mercilessly, the sharp iron thorn at the front, armed with a domineering look, and its power was terrifying. Generally, such an arrow, one arrow, can pierce the earth through a hole. However, with such a powerful arrow, in front of Liang, it looked weak. He slowly raised his right hand, 2 fingers, and easily held the arrow. Patriarch. Silence. Jama was stunned, staring blankly at the arrow in Liang's hand. His whole face was full of shock. The arrow just now was sent from her hand. She knows the power of this arrow better than anyone else. It stands to reason that this arrow can 100% pierce the heads of ordinary people, and even, if arranged, an arrow can pierce the bodies of 10 people. Such terrifying power and penetration, coupled with terrifying speed. It turned out that it was so easy to be caught by a man with 2 fingers. How could she not be shocked? This was the first time she had seen someone who blocked her arrows so easily. How is this possible? Jama's lips trembled, and her expression was full of fear, said. The 10 female warriors standing behind her were also a little flustered. Seeing that the arrow was caught so easily, this strength made their scalps numb. Diaresis, quick, go and inform Lord Snakeji. A female soldier gritted her teeth and quickly slipped away. In her opinion, this kind of terrifying enemy can only be defeated by Lord Snake. And they can only keep these people here. Absolutely, they should not be allowed to enter the range of the Daughter Island. In this case, it will bring devastating disaster to the children of the Daughter Island. Nice attack. Liang clipped the arrow and threw it aside at will, looking at the girls in front of him, and smiled faintly. His words, like a demon's smile, magnified infinitely in the eyes of everyone in front. Be sure to hold him back. Gamma gritted her silver teeth and shouted with determination. That's right, if you don't stop him and let him enter the Daughter Island, I'm afraid that ordinary people will be killed. No, not only killed, but slaughtered. Awesome, this terrible enemy must not let him take half a step into Daughter Island. Even if we die, we will keep him here. Quote. Many female warriors raised their heads with firm expressions, holding arrows and facing Liang tenaciously. Knowing that they would lose, they still chose to block Liang for the sake of Daughter Island, and could not let Liang leave half a step from here. It's just too stubborn. Liang looked at the group of female warriors in front of him, who were dying, and felt a toothache. Killing is not. If you don't kill it, it seems that this group of female warriors will do something to him. My lord, it can only temporarily make them incapacitated. Perona's face changed and she said in a low voice. Almost forgot, isn't there still you? Liang rubbed Perona's pink hair and smiled. He had forgotten that Perona's devil fruit, which can make people fall into various emotions directly, is perfect for dealing with the female warrior in front of him. Chapter 247 like a big enemy. Let me see what you can do. Liang touched Perona's pretty face and smiled. Don't worry, my lord, I can still handle these guys. Perona raised her head, looked very confident, held her head high, and even showed her figure, with a lowly face, but with the devilish figure of a mature woman. Such a woman is the envy of other women. Liang retreated and took a half step back, looking at Perona's back, a little curious. For so long, he hadn't seen Perona's ability. Coincidentally, I can witness Perona's style today. The 3 daughters of Zalulia Palace, Khalifa, and Kurla were standing behind Liang, and they were also a little curious about Perona's abilities. In many cases, Perona acted more like a good baby than they were. But at the moment, Perona's combat power does not seem to be weak. You dare to stop the steps of the adults, it is unforgivable. Holding an umbrella and holding a doll, Perona looked at the many female warriors in front of her and said coldly. Are you his helper? Jama's face became heavier and he gritted his teeth. Do it. Her words had just fallen, and the arrow had not yet moved. Perona activated the fruit ability, Negative Ghost. One by one ghosts swooped forward, penetrating every female warrior. 733. In an instant, including Jama, all 11 female warriors knelt on the ground. Their expressions changed in an instant, with tears all over their faces, and they began to cry. It's a fault that I live. I shouldn't live in this world. I'm useless. I can't do anything. I might as well die. Ah, I'm useless at all. I'd better die early. I'm so useless. Everyone, am I the most cowardly in your eyes? Am I being hated by you? I'm useless. I'm so tired of living. Quote. In the blink of an eye, a group of menacing female fighters knelt on the ground. Their negative appearance was completely opposite to the appearance just now, making people unbelievable. Khalifa and the other 3 girls were a little surprised. They never imagined that Perona's ability was so strange and mysterious. A good group of people actually turned their faces when they turned their faces, and said everything they said was useless, and they wanted to jump into the sea to seek death. This kind of devil fruit is too scary. The 3 girls were a little scared, but fortunately, Perona was her own. At least, they don't have to worry that they will be in this state. Even if they are not killed by the enemy, this appearance really makes them shameless. Sir. Perona smiled at Li Ang's position, lowered her head, and stretched out her pink hair. Very capable. Li Ang was not stingy, wiped Perona's head, and praised with a smile. Hearing Li Ang's praise, Perona was obviously even more excited, her big eyes curved into crescent moons, and she smiled, revealing white teeth and lovely pink lips. A few minutes later, the female warrior kneeling on the ground stood up, her eyes widened, looking at her body, her lips trembling, and her expression was full of fear. What's the situation? What were they doing just now? How could they do such a weird behavior? This obviously doesn't fit their character. The scary thing is that all the members are no exception. It's her. Gama stared at Perona, her voice hoarse, said. Chapter 247 If facing the enemy. Gama stared at Perona, her voice hoarse, said. It was the girl in front of her just now. After releasing those ghostly things, after penetrating their bodies, they became extremely negative. Therefore, it can be concluded that the source of everything is Perona. Immediately, they picked up the bows and arrows under their feet, and the arrows pointed directly at Perona's position. Sir. Perona hurriedly hid behind Li Ang, grabbing the corner of Li Ang's clothes, a little nervous. When it comes to close combat, she is not a match for these people at all. I'm here. Li Ang smiled, patted Perona's pink back, and comforted. Immediately, Perona was no longer so nervous, and walked to the position of Khalifa and others. Khalifa, CGBD, should not be underestimated, at least to deal with the female warrior in front of him. He still has the strength to fight. Next, let me knock you all down. Otherwise, it's too much trouble. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, and a terrifying aura emerged from his body. The breath permeated, covering the whole place. In an instant, the expressions of a group of female warriors changed dramatically, and they were shocked. His whole body trembled uncontrollably, his eyes couldn't hide the horror. He looked at Li Ang, his back was wet with cold sweat, and he remained motionless. Okay, everyone, you can go to sleep. Li Ang's face was calm, and he smiled lightly. The location in the center of the island of the daughter. Here, there is a magnificent palace. As we all know, the inhabitants of Daughter's Island know who lives here. Only the King Snake Princess is qualified to stay in this place. In this huge palace, only Hancock is alone. My mother-in-law also appears occasionally, but her residence is not always in this palace. At this time, Hancock is sitting on the snake, looking at a female warrior in front of him. His face is calm, and he asks lightly, "What's the matter?" Her delicate face, without anger, without any expression, is so beautiful that people can't extricate themselves. While speaking, she stretched her body a little, wearing a purple cheongsam. The loose cheongsam was propped up by her 2 raised balls, as if it was about to burst. A pair of straight and slender long legs as white as snow, wearing black high heels, full of charm. Her figure of 1.9 meters is close to 2 meters, and the proportions of her body are quite perfect, so the length of her legs is self-evident. It can be said that, below the neck, all legs. Even the nervous female warriors were attracted by Hancock's charm, and even forgot what they wanted to tell for a while. Even women are fascinated, let alone men. Lord Snake, someone has invaded outside the island. The female soldier bit the tip of her tongue, came back to her senses, and said quickly and truthfully. Intruder. Hancock was expressionless, his beautiful eyes flashed a cold light, and he said, "There are still people who dare to invade my territory. Who is it that has such courage? They are very strong. Lord Snake, please give orders as soon as possible." The female warrior panicked and said again. She was worried that the remaining people there would not last long. If those people were allowed to break into Daughter's Island, the disaster would be too great. Lead the way. Hancock stood up, and on the side of the split cheongsam, accompanied her walking, revealing a pair of long straight legs, looming, which really made one's blood boil. Yes, Lord Snake. After the female warrior nodded, she walked ahead. She led Hancock to the edge of the coast. Chapter 248_Eyes Man. Daughter's Island, the edge of the coast. Numerous female warriors kneeled on the ground with their hands on the ground, their faces were full of fear, their expressions were particularly horrified, and their eyes were fixed on Liang in front of them. Good, very strong momentum. And the tension in her heart has reached the extreme. This momentum, even she has never seen before. It is undeniable that this is the domineering_domineering. Compared with the domineering arrogance of Lord Snake Princess, it is countless times stronger. Even Lord Snake Princess, the overlord arrogance has never made them so unbearable. But the man in front of him, this tyrannical domineering, is simply too terrifying, and they surrendered under this momentum, shivering and unable to move. Go to sleep, wake up and everything will be fine. Liang said with a calm face and a smile. Don't think about it. Jama still bit her pink lips stubbornly and shouted. However, some of the female warriors behind her had fallen to the ground and fainted. Plop, plop. The female warriors lost consciousness and fell to the ground, very conspicuous. Seeing that even the last partner fell to the ground, Jama's mood can be imagined, her delicate face is full of despair, deep despair. They couldn't stop Liang, and it would be a huge disaster to welcome their daughter island. The willpower is quite tenacious, which surprised me. Liang looked at Jama, who was still insisting, with a hint of surprise. The overlord domineering has been strengthened again. Just now, he just took into account the physical qualities of these female warriors, and only released a little bit of domineering arrogance. After seeing Jama's willpower, he had to increase the intensity of the overlord color. Boom! The overlord domineering arrogance hit Jama head-on, causing her eyes to turn white for a moment, and she fell to her side. Before she fainted, her expression was shocked. She did not expect that Liang was not serious at all just now. This time, Daughter Island, is really about to finish. Sir. Shalulia Palace and others stood behind Liang and whispered. Let's go, these people, someone will take care of them soon. I don't want to do this, but who makes these guys too stubborn? Liang looked at the girls who fell to the ground and said helplessly. It was not what he wanted to be wary at the beginning. If it wasn't for the female warrior to take the lead, he wouldn't have to break out the domineering arrogance. Just when he was about to walk forward with the heavy girl. Ahead, in the forest, a tall woman walked out step by step. A crisp and pleasant voice came out, with an incomparably coldness. Who dares to break into Aijia's territory? As soon as the voice arrived, Hancock's figure appeared in Liang's sight. At this time, Hancock is wearing a purple slit cheongsam, and the exquisite facial features are intoxicating, as well as the devil's figure, wearing a cheongsam to outline that perfect figure. A pair of straight and slender long legs, exposed in the sun, so white that it is impossible to look directly, with black high-heeled shoes under their feet. The whole person exudes a noble and elegant atmosphere, and even women can't help being fascinated by Hancock's beauty. What a beautiful woman! Kurla looked sluggish, looked at Hancock in front of him, and lost his voice. Even after meeting for the second time, Zaluria Palace was still amazed at the beauty of Hancock in front of him. This is what God created, the most perfect woman in the world. Perona and Khalifa were ashamed of themselves, looking at Hancock in front of them with beautiful eyes. They were amazed by the beauty of the other party, and their expressions were dull. It is conceivable that the four beautiful women were attracted by Hancock's beauty. Chapter 248 The Man of Igia, and GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. It is conceivable that the four beautiful women were attracted by Hancock's beauty. Hancock's beauty, words to describe just pale. Long time no see, Hancock. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, revealing a smile, and said. In an instant, Hancock's arrogant expression made a 180-degree turn, and a blush appeared on his delicate and fair face. The original domineering demeanor turned into a little daughter-in-law in a blink of an eye, so well-behaved that it was unbelievable. Lord Snake Princess. The female warrior beside Hancock was a little suspicious. She looked at Jama and the others who were lying on the ground, and her expression became particularly angry. She pointed at Li Ang and shouted, "What did you do to them? Just let them sleep, let it go, they'll be fine." Li Ang smiled and said slowly. But the female warrior didn't buy it, and hurriedly said to Hancock, "Sir Snake G, it's him who invaded our daughter island rashly. We must bring him to justice." Presumptuous. Hancock's face was flushed. After hearing the female warrior's words, he instantly restrained himself. He looked at the female warrior with no frost on his face, and said coldly, "How could he be an intruder? What are you going to do?" Lord Snake Princess. The female warrior was stunned, looking at Hancock's angry look, feeling a little uneasy. She had no idea what was going on right now. Why is it good? My own Lord Snake G has also spoken for outsiders. Do the two really know each other? Thinking of this, the female warrior shed cold sweat on her forehead, lowered her head, and did not dare to say a word. Don't embarrass them, Hancock, they're just doing their jobs. With a smile, Li Ang walked towards Hancock step by step and said. Yeah. Hancock lowered his head, his beautiful eyes looked at his little feet, his hands kept poking at the corners of his clothes, he looked very awkward, and his expression could not show the arrogance of any empress. She looked at Li Ang, her beautiful eyes were a little blurry, and she said, "Since it's what your lord said, Hancock will naturally do it." This gesture completely petrified the female warrior. This is Lord Snake. Lord Snake, how kind and friendly to a man. What exactly is the situation? Who can tell me? The female warrior's heart was tumbling, and she was completely shocked by what she was seeing right now, and she was speechless. But here, she had to say something. Even the shy snake princess is so beautiful. A pair of eyes, almost turned into two hearts. But soon, she came back to her senses after biting the tip of her tongue. Her mood was up and down, and she didn't know what to say. Lord Snake, who is he? The female warrior's mouth moved slightly and asked tentatively. She had to know clearly who the man in front of her was. It is not something ordinary people can do to make Lord Snake G love her like this. Moreover, what has the relationship between the two reached? Heard. Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered brightly, his red lips were slightly open, and his delicate face showed a bit of happiness and a little shyness. In front of others, she is a proud and elegant queen. In front of Li Ang, she is a well-behaved little girl. Facing the questioning of the female warrior, Hancock twitched a little, thought for a moment, blushed, lowered his head, and said in that mosquito-like voice, "He is, the man of Igia." Chapter 249 _ Stay in the palace. What? The female warrior stiffened, completely startled. The man of Lord Snake. What's the situation? Lord Snake, don't you hate men very much? How suddenly, actually fell in love with a man. Moreover, he spoke calmly, claiming to be his own man. Is Lord Snake G going into someone else's arms? Thinking of this, the female warrior felt a bit of grief in her heart. I have to admit that Hancock's charm makes all the residents of Daughter Island adore her. Even women are unavoidably fascinated by her. And the man in front of him actually captured the most beautiful lady snake princess on Daughter Island, which was so heart-wrenching. The other side. Although Hancock's voice was very subtle, it couldn't escape Li Yang's hearing. After hearing Hancock's words, Li Yang smiled, 373, with satisfaction and said, Hancock, don't you invite us to sit at your place? Yeah. Hancock's face was blushing and could not dissipate in a short time. She nodded lightly and said. After saying those words just now, her face turned red as if it had been burned by fire. White smoke billowed from his head, and he walked a little carelessly. Soon, Hancock led Li Yang and the others to her palace. The mother-in-law came at the first time. She was full of anger when she saw Hancock came back with the man, and was about to reprimand her. When she saw Li Yang, all the words stopped abruptly, not daring to say a word. The situation in Daughter Island rarely goes out, so he may not be very familiar with Li Yang. But the mother-in-law herself naturally had a deep impression on Li Yang. In her impression, this Li Yang is a well-deserved terrifying powerhouse. When such a strong person arrived at Daughter Island, her mood could not be calmed down at all. What are you going to do in Daughter's Island? Are you going to destroy Daughter's Island? Suddenly, the mother-in-law was nervous. She didn't say a word, and followed Hancock cautiously, always observing Li Yang's every move. A long time. She breathed a sigh of relief. Feelings, Li Yang came here for Hancock, not to return to Daughter Island. That's right, and she doesn't have to worry about it. By the way, the Navy headquarters, didn't they send the mid-morning future to look for you? Li Yang was a little surprised, his eyes fixed on Hancock's delicate face, and he asked with a smile. Under Li Yang's gaze, Hancock lowered his head, sat on the chair, a little nervous, and replied in a low voice, It hasn't arrived yet, but it's coming soon. There is still some time before that battle. If the Chihuahua does not gather, naturally it will not be able to fight. Li Yang thought for a while and smiled. However, he didn't care about the battle. No matter how terrible the battle was, it had nothing to do with him. If he really wanted to stop this battle, he could have killed Blackbeard without leaving any trace on the terror bark. Today, the adults live here, how? Hancock looked at Li Yang with a bit of shyness and said. She mustered up the courage to finally say this. Eat her completely today. What about you? Do you want me to live here? Li Yang's face changed, and he said with a smile. He was sitting next to Hancock, smelling the direction emanating from the other person's body at close range, and for a while, the blood in his body rolled. Yeah. Swish. Hancock's face turned red, he nodded lightly, and made a small noise like a mosquito. Li Yang naturally heard it, but he pretended not to know and joked, It's too quiet, I didn't hear it. Chapter 249_check into the palace. Li Yang naturally heard it, but he pretended not to know and joked, It's too quiet, I didn't hear it. I want you to stay here, my lord. Hancock's beautiful eyes kept turning, trying to divert his attention, and white smoke was blowing from his head. A sense of dizziness caused her vision to become a little blurred. Not good. Why is my mother-in-law quick-witted? She quickly patted Hancock's face and said, Hancock, wake up. My lord is about to marry someone, so shy. Hancock's eyes fell into reverie, his beautiful eyes flowed, and he said to himself. The more she thought about it, the more ups and downs her mood became. Her face was flushed, not the shy ruddy kind, but the kind that was about to get sick. Hancock. Li Yang's eyelids jumped and he walked in front of Hancock, ready to pat him on the face. Hancock, who was withdrawing from his reverie, opened his eyes slightly, and saw Liang's face up close. His beautiful eyes widened, and the white smoke from his head kept coming out. At this moment, not only her face is red, but her skin is also red, and the whole person's blood is constantly rolling, making her gradually become a little weak. The mother-in-law looked at Liang suspiciously. She naturally knew Hancock's illness. She couldn't understand how this man could eat Hancock to death. "Everyone, let me take you to the guest room." The mother-in-law took a deep breath and said to Liang. She worried that if she kept in touch again, Hancock would die suddenly because he was too excited. Only after Liang is supported will Hancock's situation gradually calm down. "All right." Liang nodded. Hancock's condition, he can make a preliminary diagnosis. In this regard, he can only smile bitterly. Who knows, Hancock will be so excited after seeing him. Under the leadership of mother-in-law, Liang and other 5 people were found in adjacent rooms. Daughter Island, the location on the shore. The female warrior went back and forth, but she was still worried about her partner, and hurriedly walked to the front and patted Jama awake. "Jama, wake up, wake up." Her name was Hanra, and she was a member of the patrol. Now she still has the look on her face when she faced that man, the look on her face, this is the first time she has seen it. Huh. Gama gradually woke up, looked at Hanra, her pupils shrank, and hurriedly asked, "Where's that man?" "I was invited to the palace by Lord Snakeji." Hanla's mouth moved slightly, and her expression was still somewhat dazed. "What's the situation?" Jamame's eyes were round, and she asked in a voiceless voice. "It stands to reason that Mr. Snake Princess should not have an abnormal fight with that man." "How did it suddenly? So simple, calm down." "I think it's because Lord Snakeji has a very difficult relationship with that man." Hanla took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Guess what she answered when I asked Lord Sheji who that man was?" "How did you answer it?" Jama swallowed her saliva, her mood lifted involuntarily. "Lord Snake said, that man is her man." Hanla said with her pink lips slightly parted. Hearing this, Jama was stunned, unable to speak for a long time. Lord Snake's man. Chapter 250 Lord Snake is getting married. Really or not? Still in disbelief, Garma asked again. "I heard it with my own ears, what do you say?" "You didn't see it." At that time, when Lord Snakeji said these words, her expression was so loving. Hanla's mouth moved slightly and said slowly. Recalling the expression of Lord Sheji at that time, she understood that Lord Sheji really liked that man, and she liked it very much. Otherwise, it is impossible to show that demeanor. Suddenly, Jama fell into silence, without making a sound. "Wake them all up." Jama took a deep breath, calmed down, looked at the rest of the female warriors on the ground, and said, "If it has something to do with Snake Princess, then she can breathe a sigh of relief. Fortunately, that kind of terrifying man is not an enemy. If it was the enemy, it would be terrible." Looking back now, she shuddered when she was instantly killed by the other party. Just using the domineering arrogance of the overlord made her unable to move and was stunned on the spot. Even Lord Snakeji, I'm afraid, there is no such terrifying power. Soon, Gamma and Hanra woke up many female warriors and walked to the interior of the island. On the way, the two talked. Gamma said, "Sir Snakeji, do you want to marry that man?" "It feels like it should be." Hanra nodded and said, "As for what they will do after marriage, their thoughts and concepts are stuck at the beginning, completely ignorant and ignorant." The two quickly returned to the very center of the island. As soon as I got back here, I heard the residents whispering. "Have you heard? Lord Snake, did she bring back a man?" "Man? What is a man? Is it different from us?" "Let's put it this way. Our bottoms are concave, and men's bottoms are convex. I heard that outside of YY, everyone is a man and a woman. Lord Snake Princess, it is no exception." "No way, my idol Snake Ji-sama." Quote. There was a lot of talk, and there was a commotion. For a moment, the whole daughter island was spreading about Hancock and Liang. Before, when Hancock led Liang to the palace, some people inevitably saw them on the way, and these people subconsciously thought about it. Although many of their guesses are correct, they have not been confirmed. When they saw Gamma, Hanra and others, the crowd surrounded them and asked, "Jamma, you're on patrol, do you know the matter between Lord Snakegi and that person?" "That's right, does Lord Snake Princess really like this man? Otherwise, why do we forbid men to enter here, and he can still come in here? Hanla, please explain it to us, otherwise I'll be so anxious that I'm going to die." Quote. In the face of everyone's inquiries, Hanla's throat was dry, took a deep breath, and said, "Sir Snakegi really likes that man. She told me face to face." "What?" The crowd was shocked and couldn't believe it. "Sir Snake, I really like that man." A woman covered her face, her beautiful eyes full of excitement, and said, "Can we see the scene where Lord Snakegi married that man?" It means. Chapter 250 Lord Snake is getting married. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. It means. Sir Snake, are you getting married? My God, Lord Snake is getting married. This is so exciting. We are fortunate to see Lord Snake getting married, which is a blessing. Many women opened their mouths one after another, their faces were excited, and they shouted loudly. Immediately after. This piece of news directly enveloped the entire daughter island. What? You said you didn't know about this big event. Lord Snakegi is getting married, but you don't know. This is simply too hateful. Sir Snakegi is getting married. Everyone, enjoy your carnival. Daughter Island immediately fell into a carnival, and the noise enveloped the entire island. In an ordinary little wooden house. Why did the mother-in-law frown, walked out of the door, and asked the guards on both sides, "What's going on? Why are these people like crazy, what are they calling?" "Why, mother-in-law, I heard that Lord Snakegi is getting married." The two guards asked tentatively, timidly, looking at Granny's eye. Well. The mother-in-law's face froze, her brows raised, and she shouted, "Who said that Hancock is getting married? Who told the news? Everyone thinks so. Isn't it an obvious fact that Lady Snake brought a man back to her palace?" "That's right, Lord Snakegi is getting married. It's a happy day." The two guards were all yearning, their faces blushed, and they said excitedly. Hearing this, Granny took a deep breath and fell into deep thought. If it was another man, she would directly object without saying a word. After all, Hancock's energy is limited and he has to deal with the affairs of Daughter's Island. And getting married, these are not impossible to do, but, now Hancock is still young, how can he get married so quickly? This is an extra burden for no reason. But, this time, my mother-in-law had to think deeply. Because if Hancock gets married, the object will naturally be the legendary Liang. In this way, there is absolutely no harm in Hancock getting married. In addition, Daughter Island was also tied to Liang on the same front, and even the world's 727 government dared not attack Liang. If Daughter Island has something to do with Liang. Even if Hancock put aside the position of Shichibukai, the world government and even the Navy headquarters would not dare to act rashly on Daughter Island. On the sea, who doesn't know Liang's name? Not only can it form a deterrent effect on the naval headquarters and the world government, but even pirates, four emperors, Chihuahai and others have a deep fear of Liang. The relationship between Daughter Island and Liang can also make many people have scruples about Daughter Island. Even if you want to do it, you will be worried about Liang's prestige. Think about it this way. It seems that getting married is not a bad thing. The mother-in-law thought so in her heart, and a deep smile appeared on her old wrinkled face. It's good to get married, it's a good thing for Hancock to get married. Immediately, the two guards spoke up one after another. Yes, even mother-in-law, you think so? Lord Snakejee's marriage this time has made us all excited. I'll go to Hancock right now and talk to her about it. The mother-in-law turned her eyes, smiled, and said. She disappeared without a trace. Why, Grandma, wait a minute. The two guards hurriedly followed behind and shouted. But the mother-in-law is old and strong, and she is not weaker than the young man's body. In a blink of an eye, she left the two guards behind and rushed straight to the palace. Chapter 251_Remove the imprint. Inside the palace. The mother-in-law looked at Hancock lying on the cushion with an inexplicable expression and did not speak. The white lace curtain fell vertically, and on the pink sheet, Hancock was lying on top with a pink face, his slender hands resting on his forehead, and his limbs were exhausted by the blood. Hancock, how are you? The mother-in-law couldn't help but ask. She still underestimated Hancock's illness. Right now, I'm afraid that Hancock's condition is not easy. The solution is not no, but rather simple. But, it's still a little hard to tell. There were 3 emperors she assisted, and none of them had such symptoms. The solution is to make Hancock change from a woman to a woman, which is the best way. Igea's heart is about to jump out. Hancock covered the quilt, exposed his fragrant shoulders, and whispered. Her delicate face was originally 620 inches as white as jade, but now, her whiteness is rosy, like a ruby, very beautiful. A long black smooth hair, thrown aside, messy. What can't hide is her beautiful face. There is only one solution to your illness. The mother-in-law took a deep breath and said bluntly. What? Hancock's consciousness was a little confused. Mainu was absent-minded, looking at the ceiling. In her line of sight, there was a hint of rotation on the ceiling. You and Li Ang got married today. Why didn't my mother-in-law think about it, she said. This is also the purpose of her coming here. As long as she gets married, Hancock will become a woman, and all her symptoms will disappear directly. Kid, get married. Hancock's beautiful eyes were round, and his pretty face was full of bright crimson, and white smoke was coming from his head. He couldn't react, and his eyes were lost. She fell into her own reverie again. The picture of wearing white clothes and marrying Li Ang made her so excited that she almost fainted. Don't get too excited, idiot. When my mother-in-law saw Hancock's appearance, she couldn't help yelling. People, willing. Hancock murmured, falling into a dream. Looks like I have to talk to Li Ang. The mother-in-law waved her hand helplessly, sighed, and said. At present, Hancock's state is no longer able to think rationally. She can only find Li Ang and let Li Ang successfully change Hancock from a woman to a woman. Hancock's state will gradually recover. Just when my mother-in-law was about to leave, Hancock opened his eyes, his long eyelashes trembled, and said, Mother-in-law, help me get Li Ang to remove my sister's mark. Well, what do you mean? The mother-in-law raised her eyebrows and asked. My mark has been removed by him. Therefore, he can also remove the marks of my 2 sisters. Hancock's voice gradually became weaker, but he still understood the words completely. Your imprint. My mother-in-law's pupils shrank, and she quickly checked Hancock's pink back. As expected. On Hancock's back, the so-called dragon's hoof could no longer be seen. The mother-in-law's expression was frozen at this moment, and she stiffened. A long time. She raised her head, gently covered Hancock's quilt, and exhaled heavily. Finally, erase this damn mark. Chapter 251_Remove the imprint. Finally, erase this damn mark. At this time, the mother-in-law felt extremely relaxed. The imprint is gone, and everything will disappear into the dust of history with the passage of time. As the Emperor of Daughter Island, Hancock has no proof of being a slave, which is the most relaxing place for Granny Za. What she was most worried about in the past was that the imprint on Hancock's back would be seen by others. And now, this worry has vanished. Unexpectedly, Li Ang still has the ability to remove the mark from Hancock. Sleep well, I will tell Liang what you mean. At the same time, I will also explain your situation to him. Let you get married as soon as possible. And let you get rid of your current illness. As long as you become a real woman, you won't have this condition. The mother-in-law moved and gradually left Hancock's bedroom. She wants to find Liang and tell Liang what Hancock said. In addition, she must also tell Liang about marrying Hancock. Just looking at Hancock's state can't last for too long. In case of sudden death, it would be really ridiculous. As soon as she walked out of the bedroom, her mother-in-law instructed the 2 guards beside her, "Take care of this place, and don't let anyone disturb her rest." "Yes, mother-in-law." The 2 guards nodded solemnly, holding bows and arrows, guarding the gate of the bedroom at all times. At the same time, Granny Zha walked at the entrance of the passage and approached another part of the palace. In an empty hall, Liang was alone, sitting on the sofa, narrowing his eyes slightly. As for Zaluria Palace and others, they rested in their own rooms. They don't have Leona's enduring mental and physical strength. Dang dang dang. There was a sound of footsteps. Liang looked in the direction of the gate, and saw Granny Zha, who was holding a cane, walking step by step, with a very cautious expression. In the face of Liang, even the mother-in-law has to be careful. Lord Liang. The mother-in-law took a deep breath, lowered her head, and said respectfully. "What's wrong, mother-in-law? What's the matter?" Liang said with a gentle smile. "Hancock said she wanted to ask you to help her 2 sisters remove the marks on their backs." The mother-in-law said directly without thinking. "Okay, just let them come over." Liang nodded and agreed easily. Originally, this was not a difficult task for him, it was just a little effort. Moreover, he also promised Hancock before that he would help her 2 sisters remove the marks, and naturally he would not forget it. Soon, the mother-in-law led Hancock's 2 sisters to the location in the hall. At the sight of these 2 burly women, Liang felt a burst of unbelief. 4.8 With the same bloodline, Hancock is so beautiful, and her 2 younger sisters are not complimented. Could it be that the beautiful genes have been passed on to Hancock's body? On the left, the green-haired woman, the second among the 3 Hancock sisters, is named Sandersonia. The woman on the right is obese, with yellow complexion and orange-red hair, the third of the 3 sisters, and her name is Marie Grod. "Sir." The 2 women looked at Liang with great respect and said. Liang's name, the 2 of them are still familiar. For the existence of this kind of terrifying strength, they are naturally very respectful and do not dare to relax in the slightest. Liang stood up from the sofa, and in less than a minute, the marks on the 2 were removed. "Thank you, sir." The 2 women felt very excited when they felt the disappearance of their imprint. They hurriedly bowed to Liang with unusual respect. Chapter 252 Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Dragon's Hoof, which lasted for decades, was eventually erased. This made the 2 sisters feel extremely excited and respected Liang even more. This means that they can start to forget that the dark experience in the past has made them unforgettable to this day. When they leave a mark, even if they want to forget it, they can't forget it. Every moment, the existence of the mark reminds them. Even for a short period of time, they were once slaves, and their low status prevented them from really raising their heads in the eyes of the residents of Daughter Island. They are also very afraid that one day, the python will find the marks on their backs. The leader of Daughter Island turned out to be a slave. If this incident is triggered, the turmoil it will bring will be terrible. And now, they finally don't have to worry about these problems anymore, because the dragon's hoof is completely gone. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir." The 2 sisters' faces were filled with respect, looking at Liang, still unable to contain the excitement in their hearts. "You're welcome, it's just a little effort." Liang's face was calm, he waved his hand, and said. Subsequently, the 2 sisters announced their retirement. And the mother-in-law still stayed here, which made Liang a little surprised. 26 couldn't help asking, "Mother-in-law, Don't tell me, do you have anything else to do? I want to discuss with you about the marriage to Hancock. The mother-in-law took a deep breath. Her aged face was full of solemnity. She said, "Getting married is no small matter. In particular, the wedding of the Emperor of Daughters Island, you must be careful." The wedding with Hancock. Li Ang was stunned for a moment, looked at her mother-in-law's serious expression, and laughed. "Are you serious?" "Of course, Hancock's condition is not easy now. The only way I can think of is to make her a girl and a woman. Otherwise, I'm afraid she may face a huge crisis." The mother-in-law nodded solemnly and said truthfully, "One of the emperors she assisted in all dynasties died because of this." Wedding words. Li Ang's eyes flickered and he fell into contemplation. If it is a wedding, of course, the remaining 4 daughters must be added. However, there are also Robin, Nami and others who are out and cannot marry him. In this way, the wedding is not complete. If he gets married, he has to plan a complete wedding, and no one can be ignored. Therefore, if you marry Hancock alone, I am afraid that the rest of the girls will not be able to be happy. Most importantly, it has to be treated equally. At present, it is a little difficult to find Nami and Robin. God knows which corner they were photographed by the Bartholomew Bear, and they don't know where they wandered in that sea. Nami is in Visalia, a small sky island, and Robin follows the Revolutionary Army. It takes a lot of effort to find the 2 of them. Therefore, if the wedding is really going to be carried out, it is not now, it has to be delayed for a while. Thought here. Li Ang looked at his mother-in-law and thought, "Take me to see Hancock's condition. I'll help her stabilize her condition first. For a wedding, you need to think about it in the long run." "All right." The mother-in-law pondered for a moment, nodded, and said, "Judging from now, Hancock's condition, I really don't know whether it will suddenly die suddenly. It's just that Li Ang is a doctor." Why did my mother-in-law question, "Are you still a doctor?" "Of course, my medical skills are not easy." Corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched slightly and he smiled. "For example, my medical skills are on par with my strength." Chapter 252 Lieutenant General of Flying Squirrel, NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. NLT, 29 NGT. Corners of Li Ang's mouth twitched slightly and he smiled. "For example, my medical skills are on par with my strength." Suddenly, the mother-in-law put away her contempt. Li Ang's strength is recognized as terrifying, and if his medical skills are so tyrannical, there is still a way to deal with Hancock's condition. "Follow me." The mother-in-law led Li Ang and gradually left the hall. If Li Ang can really treat Hancock, there is no need to rush the matter of marriage. As Li Ang said, things like marriage have to be carefully planned. Moreover, this method can spread far and wide. Many emperors of the daughter country have the highest probability of symptoms, which is the disease. If an effective treatment plan can be obtained, it can also be passed on to every emperor in the future, and it can be applied. Daughters Island, the edge of the coast. The water moved with the wind and was thrown on the coast. The fine sand rolled up and danced in the sky. Footprints were left on the muddy soil, and the footprints were reorganized as the sea drifted. All in all, restore the tranquility of the past. The waters near Daughters Island is a windless zone. Only through the windless zone can we reach Daughters Island. Therefore, if you just follow the current, you will not be able to reach the Daughter Island smoothly. You must aim at the designated direction to drive the ship here. There are often sea kings in the windless zone, obstructing passing ships, and many times, there will be a tragedy of passing pirate ships being swallowed in one bite. At this time, a huge warship is sailing from a distance to the position of the windless belt. Ow! An incomparably huge sea king suddenly emerged from the sea, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes. The area of the eyes alone is larger than the head of an ordinary person. Whoa! The sea splashed up, causing ripples. The entire sea swayed for it, and the moving warship swayed left and right along with the swaying of the seawater. On board. A Navy soldier in a white seagull uniform, holding 563 guns, looked at the Sea Kings in front of him with some panic, and shouted, "Sea Kings are infested, all personnel are ready. Go back." A middle-aged man came gradually, holding a knife in his hand, with a fierce momentum. He wears a lavender-striped suit, dark blue shirt and tie, and has a mohawk, beard, and dark purple hair and beard. One of the Vice Admirals of the Navy Headquarters, Vice Admiral Flying Squirrel. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Numerous navies stepped aside one after another with respectful expressions. "I see." The Flying Squirrel held a saber and gradually walked to the template where the warship was completely broken. At the bow of the ship, he could better capture the appearance and types of the Sea Kings in front of him. Front. The huge Sea King is about 20 meters in size. The terrifying body is terrifying. It is also covered with scales and thorns. The exposed fangs are sharp and can reflect light. Ow! It slammed into the warship, and the sea surface was constantly rolling. The sea water splashed high, and then fell on the board of the ship, hitting the shoulders of every Navy soldier, dyeing their clothes wet. They looked cautious and held guns in their hands. They seemed a little nervous, and they didn't dare to act rashly. "Lieutenant General, can you do it?" A Navy lowered his head and asked weakly. "Nonsense, this is Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel." The rest of the Navy scoffed and shouted angrily. Chapter 253 _ The Arrival of the Navy. In the sight of many navies. The Flying Squirrel looked ahead. Even though the Sea King was huge, it couldn't affect him in the slightest. Ow! The Sea King sprinted fiercely, slapping the sea surface until the sea splashed. Crash! The sea water fell on the board of the warship, and the clothes of many Navy soldiers were wet, and they couldn't help feeling nervous. Looking at the Flying Squirrel's back, they were not very relieved. After all, this is a terrifying Sea King. "Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, why haven't you started yet?" A Navy swallowed and asked nervously. "I don't know, but the Lieutenant General has his own plans after all, so let's not interfere with the Lieutenant General's ability to judge." Another Navy shook his head and said solemnly. Seeing the Sea Kings in front of him getting closer and closer, if he said he wasn't nervous, it would be a lie. The size of the two sides is too large, and the bullets can't penetrate the other's skin. Yi Dao Lu Chinfeng slash. The corners of the Flying Squirrel's mouth moved slightly, and a sharp sword energy emerged spontaneously. Buzz. A terrifying aura filled the air, and the scene fell into silence. The Sea Kings attacked as always, and the scarlet eyes magnified infinitely in the sight of the Flying Squirrel. Cut. The Flying Squirt held the handle of the knife with both hands and slid down violently. Call out. A terrifying slash was forced out from the tip of the knife, and the dazzling light made it impossible for people to open their eyes, which was extremely dazzling. Ow! The Sea Kings felt the crisis, roared, and wanted to resist. But it's a pity. This slash of the Flying Squirrel is very powerful. How can it be blocked by ordinary Sea Kings? Puff! With the sound of cutting, bright red blood was splattered all over the sky, and the sea surface was dyed red. With the rolling of the current, it gradually faded, and then disappeared. The 20-meter-long Sea King was cut in two, and the body surfaced to the sea. I believe that soon, a group of Sea Kings will come under siege and frantically grab food. Let's go. Flying Squirrel retracted his saber, his face was calm, and he left the position of the bow lightly. After he left, many navies roared. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, he really deserves to be Lieutenant General, his strength is really strong. I went to Daughter Island on this trip. I was worried that the rumored, hot-tempered Empress would kill us. But with Lieutenant Flying Squirrel, we don't have to worry too much about this trip. This time, I invite Empress Hancock to rush to Mary Joa, a big event. Chihuahai has been dispatched one after another. You say, what's the matter? Quote. A group of navies formed a circle and were discussing and analyzing what had happened recently. But no matter what they think, they can't think of it. What will happen next will shock the whole world and catch everyone off guard. The original Rayleigh and Shachi can better feel Li Ang's original prophecy. The two of them still didn't believe that the four emperors would go to war with the Navy headquarters. Now, once the news spreads, I am afraid that they will not be able to maintain a calm state of mind. It's a pity that Li Ang didn't choose to bet with the two of them at that time, otherwise, he could reap a large amount of berry again, and he was not afraid that Rayleigh and the others would default on their bills. In front of Li Ang, no one can default. Lieutenant General, I saw Daughter Island. A Navy's face moved and said excitedly. Ahead, an island magnified infinitely in their sight. Flying Squirrel walked out of the house, looked straight ahead, and his face gradually became solemn. Chapter 253 _ The Arrival of the Navy. NLT, 31 and GT. Flying Squirrel walked out of the house, looked straight ahead, and his face gradually became solemn. One of the Chihuahai, the female Emperor Hancock, has a hot temper, and this is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Not only the female Emperor Hancock, but anyone in the Chihuahai is quite terrifying. Every Chihuahai must be invited by a lieutenant general, otherwise if the official position is too low, I am afraid that Chihuahai will not pay attention to the naval headquarters at all. Hopefully, all goes well. The corner of the Flying Squirrel's mouth moved slightly, and his voice was slightly low. Once he angered the other party, he himself did not have the confidence to survive the attack of the other party alive. The strength of Chihuahai is not covered. Although those at the end of the Chihuahai may not be very strong. But the strength of the female Emperor Hancock in front of him is quite terrifying. There are also Hawkeye Mahawk, Doflamingo and others, all of whom are in the top position of Chihuahai, standing at the highest level of strength. Finally, the warship arrives at the edge of the coast of Daughter's Island. The high-hanging white seagull flag represents their identity. It is said that the island of the Daughter is forbidden to men. Flying Squirrel pondered for a while, and then ordered to his subordinates, "Next, everyone should stand by and stay on the boat, and they can't go anywhere." "Yes, Lieutenant General." Numerous Navy nodded, not daring to disobey the Flying Squirrel's order. Soon, a group of female warriors armed with bows and arrows walked out of the forest, looking at the warship ahead, raised their brows, and their faces gradually became serious and serious. Men of the Navy. The corners of Jama's mouth moved slightly, and her tone was slightly heavy. If they were from the Navy, then they couldn't do anything at will. Moreover, the other party did not violate the rules of the Daughter's Island, and they naturally couldn't kill innocent people indiscriminately. "Diaresis, please report to Lord Hancock, and say that the people dispatched by the Navy headquarters will welcome her to marry Joa, please prepare. 3 days later, the departure will be soon." The Flying Squirrel looked forward and said slowly, "You must bring the original words to you." Gamma took a deep breath and nodded. Immediately, she ordered some people to guard here, and she plunged into the forest alone and walked towards the central area of Daughter Island. It is no trivial matter for the Navy to come here. Moreover, the other party named and surnamed the person who was looking for the Lord Sheji. She had to bring the words to the other party, and there must be no mistakes. With Jama's departure, the place fell into a quiet atmosphere. The Flying Squirrel stood at the bow of the boat, waiting patiently. Directly in front of the coast, a group of female warriors held bows and arrows. They did not dare to be careless, but they would not act rashly. This is the Lieutenant General who came to represent the world government. Once they attack, it means that Daughter's Island will break with the world government. Such consequences are far from what they can bear. It's really abhorrent to come to see Lord Snakeji at this time. A female soldier gritted her teeth, fiercely pressed against the Navy in front, and whispered, "No, Lord Snakeji's big day is coming soon. It's so annoying for them to interrupt at this time. Don't say it, they're all listening, we'd better keep our mouths shut." But then again, Lord Snakegi and Lord Liang are really a good match, an enviable pair. Quote. In an instant, the flying squirrel standing in the bow position changed slightly, his throat was dry, and his eyes were focused on the female soldier in front. Just because he heard someone's name. But it made him a little unbelievable. Liang. The flying squirrel whispered to himself with trembling lips. NLT, 32 and GT. Chapter 254-Frightened. Lieutenant Flying Squirrel, what's wrong with you? A navy noticed the fluctuations in the flying squirrel's expression and couldn't help asking. However, at this time, the flying squirrel had already been silent in the words of the female warrior, unable to extricate himself, completely unable to return to his senses and listen to the words of his subordinates. Leon. Actually, encountering such terrifying existence here is too much. The flying squirrel's lips trembled, his eyes couldn't hide a terrified expression, and his arms trembled unconsciously, shaking uncontrollably. Was a participant in the Battle of the G3 branch. However, at that time, he was incapable of participating in it, and could only be responsible for transporting the severely injured general of the Yellow Monkey to leave the battlefield. That scene made him unforgettable to this day. If it is said that whoever frightens him the most in this sea area, this person is undoubtedly Liang. Is it the same name? Or, is it the real him? The flying squirrel's eyes were a little throbbing, thinking. He really hoped that this person was not the Liang he imagined. If so, then he'll have to detour. The Navy headquarters had a contract with him, so he probably won't do anything to us. Flying Squirrel thought to himself, and immediately ordered his subordinates around him, saying solemnly, "Later, no one can talk nonsense here. Without my order, all of you will be honest with me, and don't do anything. Something out of the ordinary, understand?" 120. Yes, Lieutenant General. Many Navy soldiers couldn't understand it, but they accepted it anyway. A Lieutenant General's order, how could they disobey? Looking at Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel's face, it doesn't seem very good looking, and how scared. Many Navy bowed their heads, not knowing what they were thinking. But in general, their fear of flying squirrels can still be clearly seen. Because Flying Squirrel couldn't hide it at all, the fear in his heart at the moment was completely revealed in the eyes of his subordinates, which was unsightly. This is the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, the Flying Squirrel Lieutenant General. Why are you so scared? A Navy whispered, burying his head in puzzlement. However, when he looked at Daughter Island in front, he was also a little heavy. I'm afraid, it was this island that made Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel feel his heart palpitations. Even the Lieutenant General was intimidated, so they are so small, so naturally there is no need to say more. Anyway, as long as you don't provoke things casually, that's enough. Immediately, Flying Squirrel calmed down a little, looked at the female warrior in front of him, his throat was dry, in order to confirm his inner thoughts. He opened his mouth and asked, "Everyone, can you tell me, CGAF, in detail about the Liang in your mouth?" On the shore, many female warriors saw the Flying Squirrel asking questions, but they did not ignore the other party's thoughts. Since they are from the Navy, the possibility of a battle between the two sides will be very low. They don't act rashly, they just hold bows and arrows just in case. When they heard the Flying Squirrel's question, all the girls spoke one after another, speaking angrily. "You said Mr. Liang, this is the husband of our Lord Snakegi. They are about to get married, but unfortunately, you have disturbed them." "That's right, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You can see the wedding of Lord Snake Princess, and I will die without regrets in my life. But it's you who ruined the wedding abruptly. Do you think you are guilty? You guys don't come early or late, but you chose this time to come, is it intentional?" Quote. Facing the questioning of many female warriors, the cold sweat on the Flying Squirrel's forehead became more obvious, the spine was wet with the seawater, and the whole face flashed a little panic. His thoughts at the moment were gloomy. It's over. He actually disturbed the good deeds of Mr. Liang. This is over, I'm afraid. I can't easily leave here alive, right? Chapter 254-Frightened. NLT, 33 and GT. This is over, I'm afraid. I can't easily leave here alive, right? Wedding. Such a big thing was disturbed by his sudden arrival. If Liang was angry, all of them would have to be buried in the sea. Thinking of this, Flying Squirrel's face turned pale for a while, his lips trembled, and he hurriedly said, "Everyone, I didn't mean it. Who knows, you are a squeamish bastard, and it's not a good thing at first glance." Hamla glanced at the Flying Squirrel and said viciously, "Gosh. This is Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Actually, was described as a thief." On board, many navies were stunned, looking at the many female soldiers in front of them with shock. Is the world in chaos? Even the Lieutenant General of the headquarters has been described as a thief, and there is no king law. Lieutenant General, Flying Squirrel. Everyone looked at the Flying Squirrel's position and wanted to see what the other party would do. But the result surprised them even more. I see. The Flying Squirrel actually scratched his head. Not only was he not angry, but he was somewhat flattering. He quickly explained and said, "The world can be learned, I really didn't mean it. Don't worry, we're not unreasonable people either. Judging from your sincerity, we won't go and report to Lord Snakegi. You're a pretty good guy. Unlike the navies I've seen before, you're quite decent, and we won't embarrass you, so you don't have to worry." The 10 female warriors looked at the Flying Squirrel and couldn't help but smile and assured. Thank you all." Flying Squirrel exhaled heavily, showing a smile, said, "It can be considered that the matter has been resolved, otherwise, these female warriors will talk about it. Even if it is a small matter, it will turn into a big event. Heaven and earth can learn from it." He was Flying Squirrel, it really wasn't intentional. It's just strange, who asked the people from the Navy headquarters to give him this order? Also, it took a long time to get to this kind from Marin Fando, but I was stuck at this juncture, and I was very desperate. But fortunately, in the end, the matter was resolved satisfactorily. If it really is that Lord Liang, as long as there is no conflict, then he will still be safe and sound. Flying Squirrel calmly wiped the sweat from his forehead, and finally calmed down his nervousness and returned to his calm appearance again. Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel, what happened to you? Some Navy spoke up and asked. It's nothing, it's very rude to disturb other people's good things. I'm not apologizing, what's so strange? Flying Squirrel raised his head, looked at his subordinates, and said calmly. But seeing how you looked just now, you can't wait to get down on your knees. A group of Navy murmured in their hearts, but they didn't dare to say it, they could only think in their hearts. Their eyes also became a little unnatural, and they quickly echoed, yes, what Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel said is very true. Okay, you guys are guarding here, I'll go in and have a rest. If anything happens, report it to me immediately. I'll just remind you a little here. If you encounter anything, you must not conflict with them, understand? The Flying Squirrel was still a little worried, and finally reminded. Once a conflict breaks out, the game for their group is over. Therefore, he must curb the occurrence of this situation, so that these subordinates can clearly understand that this is not a place where their navy can be presumptuous. Yes, Lieutenant General. The Navy nodded quickly and said. NLT, 34 and GT. Chapter 255-Treatment Plan. Daughter Island. Because Hancock brought Liang back to the palace, this incident has swept the entire kingdom, and the daughter's country is full of noise and excitement. Everyone is in the street, and they are talking about, when will my own Lord Snakegi marry Lord Liang? This matter made many people extremely excited. Was lucky enough to witness the Emperor's wedding Tilda. This is the first time in their lives, they have seen this situation. Of a man. This man is about to become the husband of their snake princess. Master Snakey is getting married. Everyone, let's make some origami and send blessings to Master Snakey. Today, our store will be 50% off to celebrate the big day of Lord Snake. However, there seems to be a navy outside looking for Lord Snake. I don't know, will it affect the wedding? These goddamn navies will come sooner rather than later, but this time, I really want to drive them away. Quote. Some expressed dissatisfaction with the arrival of the navy. But they didn't dare to act rashly, they could only speak ill of words. At this time. Central location. There is a splendid palace here, with a very large area. The exterior is made of white tiles like jade, and the sun shines down and reflects the dazzling light. Inside the palace. In a certain room. Mother-in-law led Liang to Hancock's bedroom smoothly. As soon as he entered the bedroom, Liang smelled the faint fragrance in the air, the smell belonging to Hancock, which made him linger and forget. In an instant, he recognized the source of the fragrance. On the cushion, Hancock's whole body was crimson, and his skin was like a ruby. He was covered with a quilt, only his fragrant shoulders and jade arms were exposed, and his delicate face was very hot. Hancock. The mother-in-law quickly walked to Hancock's side, looking a little nervous. After checking the other party's condition, he breathed a sigh of relief. Lord Liang, please. The mother-in-law looked at Liang and said slowly. Hearing this, Liang walked over to Hancock's side, looking at the person's red skin. His face remained unchanged. He reached out and grabbed Hancock's slender wrist to check the situation. How? Why is my mother-in-law worried and asked. She was afraid that even Liang could not do anything about it, and the marriage was imminent. Or just ignore the steps of marriage and let Hancock stabilize his condition first. Then, it's not too late to think about marriage. After Liang checked Hancock's pulse, he put the iron on the man's white jade-like forehead. It felt hot to the touch, and his blood seemed to be burning. Hancock still fell asleep. Otherwise, when she saw Liang, she was afraid that her condition would worsen rapidly and completely out of control. A long time. Liang put the quilt on Hancock, and gently stretched out Hancock's slender and fair jade arm into the quilt, and stood up slowly from the side. The mother-in-law fixed her gaze on Liang and asked, "What's wrong? Is there any way?" "I'm afraid, it's not that simple." Liang's eyelids jumped and he said bluntly, "It's a bit difficult to do it. Can't be direct. As long as she becomes a woman, her condition will disappear, right?" The mother-in-law took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. "It's not that simple." Liang repeated the words again, under the suspicious eyes of her mother-in-law. He walked gradually to the window and explained, "You overlooked a point. Chapter 255 Treatment Plan. NLT, 35 and GT. He walked gradually to the window and explained, "You overlooked a point." "What? Why is my mother-in-law frowning? Her wrinkled face is full of confusion, she can't think of it at all. What is she neglecting?" It stands to reason that her method is 100% feasible. In the sight of her mother-in-law, Liang said again, "If you make her a woman, it can be solved. However, you ignore her current state. Do you think that she can still bear such injury when she is weak?" This. The mother-in-law was speechless for a moment. Really? The solution is feasible, but the process is difficult to guarantee whether Hancock can endure it. Now that Hancock's condition is getting more and more serious, and his physique is declining, I'm afraid that there is some sense of crisis in doing that kind of thing. In her mind, the foolproof method, in fact, cannot be 100% successful. Immediately after, mother-in-law was a little panicked and asked quickly, "What should I do then?" "She still has a high fever." Liang's face was calm, and he said again, "It's not just a disease, it's difficult to start. We can only let her take care of her body first to prevent her from getting weaker according to the current situation." "What do I need to prepare?" the mother-in-law quickly asked. "I'll give you a list of some herbs. After you collect the herbs, boil them into a bowl of soup according to the method on the list. Li Ang thought about it for a while, and countless plans emerged in his head, said. He can choose a plan at random, and he can cope with the current situation. However, these plans are still somewhat restrained. What he can guarantee is that Hancock will not die, but the specific recovery time depends on the changes in the efficacy of the drug and Hancock himself. He could not grasp the precise time of the patient's recovery. But it won't be more than 3 days. Good. The mother-in-law nodded solemnly and said. Soon. After Li Ang listed the herbs, he handed them to Granny Zha. In order to ensure the efficiency, my mother-in-law traveled all over the daughter island by herself, and finally collected all the medicinal materials. Put the herbs into the stove in batches and cook them according to the method on the list. Immediately, she let her hand carry a small bowl and sent it to Hancock's bedroom. Sir. The female warrior lowered her head, holding a small bowl in her hand, said. Put it down. Li Ang nodded. The smell of the medicine was pungent, and he could smell it all the way. Yes. After the female warrior put down the medicine, she left the palace. Why did my mother-in-law look at Li Ang, and then at Hancock? A problem appeared again, and said, how to feed her. Simple. Li Ang said lightly, lifted the ceramic bowl directly, took a sip, leaned down, squatted, and looked at Hancock's delicate and flawless face up close. Suddenly, my mother-in-law understood. She coughed dryly, moved her footsteps, and took the initiative to leave here. In the room, only Li Ang and the unconscious Hancock were left. Li Ang directly put the medicine in his mouth into Hancock's mouth. Naturally, intimate contact will inevitably occur. It's just that he was not in the mood to taste it at all, except for the bitter medicinal taste in his mouth. There was no other taste. NLT, 36 and GT. Chapter 256_what? Cough. Huh. Hancock gradually opened his eyes, his long eyelashes trembled, and Maimyu saw a figure, looking at him from a close distance. In an instant, Hancock's pretty face blushed again, and he whispered, Lord Li Ang. It's me. The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised. He rubbed Hancock's delicate face, and said with a smile, do you feel better? Yeah. Hancock nodded lightly, not knowing whether she was okay or not. Anyway, she just nodded. Just now, Lord Li Ang, were you kissing someone? Thinking of this, Hancock's face turned even redder, his eyes dodged, and he didn't dare to look at each other, but his pretty face still revealed a deep exhaustion. Li Ang clearly saw this. He put the ceramic bowl aside and sat beside Hancock, rubbing the other's black silky hair with his palms, very light, 323, without speaking. Hancock narrowed his eyes slightly, and felt that Li Ang was sitting beside him. The sense of security was indescribable. Just closing his eyes like this, the exhaustion soon struck, making her fall into a deep sleep again. However, her slender hand grabbed Li Ang's arm and said nothing. Just like the little girl grabbed someone she could trust and had a strong sense of security before she fell asleep, she had no intention of letting go. See. Li Ang let out a laugh, and gently pushed away Hancock's slender jade fingers, feeling the delicate skin, as if touching a flawless jade carving, impeccable. Go to sleep. Li Ang put Hancock's hand into the sheet, pulled up the sheet, and covered it to Hancock's neck. After doing all this, he gradually stood up and left the room. But before he left, Hancock shuddered and opened his eyes quickly. His beautiful eyes were misty, and his voice became a little hoarse. He said, Lord Li Ang. At this moment, she is like an injured little girl, trying to find someone she can rely on. After seeing the back of Li Ang leaving, her mood could not be contained. Without any choice, Li Ang could only come back, sitting beside Hancock, looking at the sweet smile of the other party. Hancock entangled Li Ang like an octopus and showed no signs of relaxing. You must know that she is wearing pajamas now, and many places are looming in Li Ang's eyes, which really makes him, a man with strong blood, a little unbearable. However, Li Ang did not do much, and could only suppress the blood in his heart. Now Hancock is not suitable for doing those things. Therefore, he can only suppress the blood in his heart. What a charming little goblin. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, rubbing Hancock's delicate and pretty face, and said, "Huh." In Hancock's deep sleep, one turned over, his pajamas slipped down, revealing his fragrant shoulders, and the deep ditch, looming, was really uncontrollable. It took a lot of effort for Li Ang to take his eyes away from there. Immediately, putting the sheets on Hancock effectively covered up the other party's radiance. It's hard to do. Seeing Hancock clutching his hands tightly, Li Ang shook his head helplessly, the corners of his mouth curled up, and he lay flat beside Hancock. Forget it, anyway, I haven't slept so peacefully in a long time. Li Ang exhaled heavily, with a smile, lying beside Hancock. Immediately after, Hancock seemed to feel something, and quickly drilled into Li Ang's arms, holding Li Ang's waist tightly with both hands, showing no sign of loosening at all. She put her head on Li Ang's chest, with a sweet smile on her face. Her black hair was messy, but she couldn't hide her delicate face. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. Chapter 256_what? Cough. NLT, 37 and GT. The door was knocked. Li Ang opened his eyes, and there was a chatter in his ears. When my mother-in-law was outside, she stopped people and said that no matter what, she could not disturb Hancock at this time. In this regard, Jama could only helplessly wait at the gate outside with her mother-in-law. Li Ang was unmoved, anyway, listening to the conversation of the other party. It was only the people from the Navy who came, and it was not a big deal. Even if he moved his toes, he could think of it. This group of Navy is here now, nothing more than for one thing. Shichibukai summoning order. Li Ang had already realized this point, but he didn't take it to heart. Sleep well. When you wake up, any pain will be cured. Li Ang looked at Hancock up close, without any sleepiness, and laughed in a low voice. Beautiful things are always attractive. He just looked at Hancock's face like this, with long eyelashes, a tall nose, bright red lips, skin as jade, white as snow, beautiful eyebrows soothing, and he slept soundly. Li Ang was deeply fascinated by the beautiful and moving face, and stared at Hancock's delicate face, motionless and without blinking. In the sky, the sun gradually went down. Inside the palace, Hancock opened his eyes, and when he entered his eyes, he saw Li Ang looking at him, his pretty face blushing slightly, and he whispered, "What time is it now?" "You've slept for nearly a day." With a smile on his face, Li Ang rubbed Hancock's hair and replied, "It's been a day." Hancock was a little surprised. Maimyu looked at Li Ang intently. Her cute and charming appearance made people intoxicated. Soon, she thought of another point. I have always held Li Ang. And looking at the performance of the other party, it is difficult. Hancock blushed and asked in a low voice, You watch people all day." "Of course, our Hancock, I can't get enough of it." Li Ang put his hand on Hancock's face and smiled. "Not so hot. Hancock's condition is recovering at an obvious speed. Presumably, soon, she will be able to stabilize part of her condition. At that time, if she does some indescribable things, her condition will be completely cured." At this time, hearing Li Ang's affectionate words, Hancock covered his face, looking very shy. 3.3 feet's skin turned red, and said, "Really?" "Of course it's true." Li Ang stretched out his hands and wrapped his arms around the other's slender and boneless waist, said, "You close your eyes." Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and he reached out to cover Li Ang's eyes. Mysterious. Li Ang closed his eyes and said with a smile on his face. Soon, he felt it, and the coldness on his mouth slid across. Hancock let go of his hands, his eyes dodged, he dared not look directly at Li Ang, and said, "Reward, the reward you have been with me for so long. If this kind of reward, then I am willing to accompany you to the end of the world." Li Ang laughed and said, Suddenly, Hancock's eyes softened, and his beautiful eyes curved into crescent moons. Her pretty face was full of joy, and her heart was sweet, even sweeter than she had drunk honey, the sweetness that penetrated her heart. Chapter 257 I hate knocking on doors. You can talk. Hancock's beautiful eyes were full of joy, and his heart was full of joy, but verbally, he still pretended to be angry, looked at Liang, and said angrily, "Women." Liang's face was calm, and he said with a smile. He naturally saw Hancock's mood swings, but the fact that the other party was still pretending to be dissatisfied still made him a little unpredictable. One of the biggest problems in the world, what a woman has in mind. Even Liang couldn't read Hancock's heart. For a moment, it is simply unpredictable. Are you feeling better? Liang put the back of his hand against Hancock's fair forehead, but the temperature dropped a lot. Come to think of it, Hancock's symptoms are also clearly subsiding. Of course it will be fine with you around. Hancock's beautiful eyes looked forward, his pretty face was red, and he didn't dare to look at Liang. She couldn't believe this kind of nauseous words, it was actually said from her mouth. Hancock, you've changed, you wouldn't say that before. Liang's eyes flashed 26, holding Hancock's face in his palms, said. Hancock, who was pinched by him, had a pretty face and a chubby face, puffed up his face, and quickly pushed Liang's hands away, dissatisfied. I have made people's faces fat, what should no one do? No one wants better. Liang burst out laughing. Seeing that Hancock's expression gradually changed, he had a brainstorm and said with a smile, it's enough to have me, what else do you need others to do? It's your acquaintance. Hancock cheered up again and said, however, I learned this from you. Who made you talk so nasty? Is it mushy? I don't think so, I just think that what I say comes from the heart. Liang smiled and said. The unsuspecting Hancock was hit again by Liang, his pretty face was flushed, his delicate and flawless face was shy, and he covered his face with embarrassment. If outsiders see it, I'm afraid, even the eyeballs will be scared off. This is one of the 7 Marshalseas, the female Emperor Hancock. To be able to show such a little daughter's attitude, it's amazing. In the blink of an eye, Hancock's beautiful eyes glanced at Liang, and his charming appearance was not too beautiful, and it took Liang's soul away. Again. Hancock snorted. Although she said so, there was no dissatisfaction on her face. What you can see from her face is a deep sense of happiness. You are so beautiful, I can't praise you enough. In case, if I don't praise you anymore, you are kidnapped by others, what should I do? I can only live alone when I am left alone. With a touch of sadness, Liang said with a sigh. Although he knew that Liang was pretending, Hancock still felt distressed for no reason. He bit his pink lips and looked at Liang with his beautiful eyes. Her expression became very firm, and she said, no, I will recognize you in my life. No matter what, it will not change. Little fool, why are you so serious? Liang's heart moved, his eyes became softer, and he said with a smile. Huh. Hancock snorted, turned his head, shook his black hair, and said, I knew you were a liar. Well, they still have to tell you that. I found out that I have a disease, what should I do? Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said. What disease? Hancock blinked innocently, she couldn't believe it, Liang actually got sick. Chapter 257 I hate knocking on the door, NGT, page 1/2 please click the next page to continue reading. NLT, 39 NGT. Hancock blinked innocently, she couldn't believe it, Liang actually got sick. This is the terrifying existence of suppressing the naval headquarters alone. Lovesickness. Liang's eyes flashed, he squeezed Hancock's nose, and said with a smile, I like you more and more, and if I don't see you for a while, I will miss you very much. There is no cure for this disease, what should I do? Hancock's beautiful eyes were curved like a crescent moon, the corners of his mouth moved slightly, revealing white teeth, and he said with a smile, then it's up to you. Anyway, I will not leave you. If you have lovesickness, I may also suffer from it. We all feel sorry for each other, and you have to treat me well. Otherwise, my lovesickness will not be saved. Hancock smiled and narrowed his eyes slightly, his long eyelashes fluttering. At the same time, her pajamas slid down a corner again, revealing her white and pink shoulders, and her skin was light jade, which made people fascinated by it. Moreover, there is the deep groove, which is even more obvious. For a while, Li Ang's body's blood boiled, his eyes gradually became aggressive, and his voice was hoarse. Hancock. Well. Hancock lowered his head, bewildered. How to do? Are you going to do that? Still resist? Wouldn't he be unhappy if he resisted? I don't want to make him unhappy. But if it was him, I would also give him everything that belongs to me. At this moment, Hancock felt like a little rabbit in his heart, pounding and nervous. The atmosphere becomes subtle. Li Ang's throat was dry, and he was close to Hancock's delicate face, ready to start. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door, echoing in the quiet room. Hancock's face turned crimson with a swish. He hurriedly pushed Li Ang away and said, "Yes, there are outsiders. We can't let them hear it. Hurry up and open the door." Li Ang's whole body's blood went out all of a sudden, his eyes were still bloodshot, and his expression was particularly helpless. He turned his eyes to the direction of the gate and cursed in his heart, "I hate knocking on the door." Hancock covered her pink lips and laughed lightly. Seeing Li Ang's appearance, her mood became more comfortable, and her original condition also decreased a lot. 867 inches. Go and open the door. Anyway, this kind of thing is not in a hurry. Hancock blushed, and in order not to make Li Ang uncomfortable, he gradually lowered his head, poked the corner of the sheet with both hands, and said in a voice like a mosquito, "Yes." Li Ang's eyes lit up, he stood up from the cushion and walked to the door step by step. Looking at Li Ang's back, Hancock's face was hot and hot. She covered her face and said to herself in an embarrassing tone, How could I say such a thing? It must be an illusion, it's an illusion. That's right. It's just that when she looked at Li Ang's back, her eyes gradually changed, and emotions such as love, softness, warmth and so on that were hard to hide were added together. Originally, she had feelings for Li Ang. And now, that feeling has skyrocketed. At this moment, she was really caught in the vortex belonging to Li Ang, unable to extricate herself. Really, I really like it. Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and the corners of his mouth drew an arc as he muttered to himself. This feeling filled her heart, making her feel that she was enveloped in a sense of happiness all the time. Hancock pulled the quilt with both hands, covered his body, wrapped it in the quilt, and looked at Li Ang as he approached the door. His eyes stayed on Li Ang's body and never moved away. It was as if there was some kind of magic power that had been attracting her all the time, so that she couldn't take her eyes off Li Ang at all. Chapter 258 _ The news sweeping the world. Holy Land, Mary Joa. Wu Laoxing dialed the phone bug. The person opposite is the Marshal of the Navy Headquarters, the Warring States period. Scheduled to start. The knife-wielding man in a kimono said slowly. Understood. After the Warring States nodded, he hung up the phone bug, looked at the peaceful Malin Fando outside the window, fell into silence, didn't say a word, he just looked at the dusk so quietly. There is not much time left for him to be peaceful. Dong dong dong. Come in. Warring States looked at the location of the gate and said lightly. Crunch. The door was pushed open, and a Navy soldier walked in with a very respectful expression, and asked, Marshal of the Warring States period, do you have any orders for your subordinates? Record my next words, use seagulls to convey them, and inform the whole sea area. Even the New World must receive this news. Sengoku took a deep breath and said. His eyes twinkled brightly, and his expression was unprecedentedly solemn. ... The hot sun shines down. The sea was flickering with golden light, which was so dazzling that it made people unable to open their eyes. Just like a lot of golden mountains, just in front of you, as far as the eye can see. A pirate ship sailing on the sea. On the sky. A seagull carrying the latest posters from the Navy headquarters, sometimes falling from the air, steadily appeared in the hands of a pirate. He has thick eyebrows, a scar on the left side of his face, a burly stature, and a machete around his waist. His name is Jarek, with a bounty of 84 million berry, and he is also the captain of the Red Leaf pirate ship. At this time, Jarek held the poster and looked at on it. His face changed greatly, and he shouted, "This sea is going to be in complete turmoil." "Boss, what happened?" The pirates on the rest of the boats approached and asked. Fire Fist Ace, captain of the 2nd Division of the Four Emperors Whitebeard Pirates, was arrested by the Navy headquarters. Moreover, the execution time has been announced. Jarek's hands trembled a little and said bluntly, "A terrifying battle at this level will definitely make the sea boil." It made a small character like him feel confused about the future sea. What? The crowd was shocked, and their faces were full of disbelief. Then, a pirate lost his voice. "The Navy headquarters has indicated the specific time. Doesn't that mean that he wants to fight the Whitebeard pirates head-on? If it's not for the Whitebeard pirates, it can be directly execution." This is true, so it is certain that the Navy headquarters is planning a terrifying war that swept the entire sea area. The Whitebeard pirates are the fuse. The rest of the pirates opened their mouths and thought. This matter is already a certainty, and the purpose of the Navy headquarters is obvious. Basically a normal person who can see the plans of the Navy headquarters. They are going to confront one of the 4 emperors, the Whitebeard pirates. "Boss, do you think Whitebeard will come?" Chapter 258 _ The news sweeping the world. "Boss, do you think Whitebeard will come?" A pirate asked weakly. The most important key person in this battle is naturally Whitebeard. Whether he participates in the battle is a very important question. If Whitebeard didn't come, the so-called war would naturally be impossible. But if he prepares to rescue Fire Fist Ace, the war will inevitably unfold. Yes, definitely. Jarek took a deep breath, his tone was slightly heavy, and he said firmly, "I know something about Whitebeard. He will never give up anyone on his ship. What's more, he is the captain of the 2nd Division. Fire Fist Ace. That is to say, this war is inevitable." The pirate was startled, his lips trembled, and he said in horror. "Next, the upcoming battle is about to attract much attention. The battle between the Navy headquarters and one of the 4 emperors, the Whitebeard pirates. This is Whitebeard. Decades ago, he fought with Roger the Pirate King countless times. The older generation of characters across the sea, Whitebeard Edward Newgate. At the same time, he is also known as the strongest man in the world. Once this war breaks out, it can be foreseen how violent the sea will cause. Not only us, but also many navies, revolutionary armies, etc., everyone will pay attention to Marin Vando. The corners of Jarek's mouth moved slightly, and he said in a low tone. Immediately, he waved his hand and ordered the helmsman to change direction. "Captain, where are we going?" Some people asked quickly, feeling uneasy. Changing the sailing direction, we hurried to the Chambord Islands. There, waiting for the outbreak of the war. I believe that the Navy headquarters will definitely use the video bug to broadcast live. They must live broadcast such a big event. This is the best time for them to establish their majesty. Once they have defeated the Whitebeard pirates, they can see from the side the tyranny of the Navy headquarters. Diaresis, it can also stabilize the mentality of many alliance kingdoms. Because of Li Ang's affairs, there have been many dissatisfaction. The current naval headquarters can only win, never fail. Jarek was a sensible man, and his analysis was very thorough. This is also the current predicament of the Navy headquarters. If Fire Fist Ace is rescued, then all the majesty of their naval headquarters will collapse. This is completely different from the time when Li Ang fought. The person on the opposite side is Whitebeard, who has been in the sea for many years. The reputation of the Whitebeard pirates is known to all pirates who go out to sea. Its deterrent power is self-evident. If the Navy headquarters defeats the Whitebeard pirates, it will naturally gain a lot of people's hearts and form a deterrent to the pirates. However, if it fails, the result will be self-evident. It's just that under such a meticulous arrangement, Sengoku will never think that the people on his side of the naval headquarters will fail. On the contrary, he is looking forward to how the people of the Whitebeard pirates will appear in Marin Fando. Are warning lines everywhere. Qian Wang Jiao, once there is any change, it will lead to fatal murder. In this case, what would Whitebeard do? At the same time, this news swept the entire sea in an instant. Whether it is pirates, navy, Revolutionary Army, or civilians, etc., all of them have received posters from the Navy headquarters. They all know that there will be a big war in the future, which is about to break out. Although it is unbelievable, the news from the Navy headquarters can never be wrong. For a while, the sea fell into silence, and everyone felt the tranquility before the storm. The sea was peaceful, quieter than usual. During this time, there were very few pirates fighting, and everyone's attention was focused on Marin Fando, and some people were inquiring about the trail of the Whitebeard pirates. There is bound to be a war between the two, which everyone knows well. NLT, 42 and GT. Chapter 259_Planner. Profit. Hey, have you heard? The latest news is terrifying. I'd rather believe it's fake than real. After all, if it's true, the impact on this world will be too great. The Navy headquarters, and the four emperors, will finally have a head-to-head confrontation. I dropped the turtle. If this fights, how many people will die in this war? Whether it's pirates or the Navy, I'm afraid the number of casualties will be in the tens of thousands. Quote. A middle-aged man, with a horrified expression in the restaurant, talked in a low voice. This news is circulating in almost the entire restaurant. The captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates, Fire Fist Ace, was arrested by the Navy headquarters, and the news of his execution today has swept the entire sea area. Basically, anyone with a bit of news already knows it. Even middle-aged women who stayed at home were informed of the news. At that time, they were terrified and did not wash their clothes. They hurriedly asked about the truth of the matter. Everyone fell silent when they learned that it was a sure thing. War is not a good word for it. War means bloodshed and death. What's more, this is still a huge war, not to mention more. 28. At this time, Chambord Islands. The positions of countless pirates are boiling, and they are wearing video worms, wanting to watch the battle. Unlike the panic of the commoners, they were very excited. For war, this is what they want. Otherwise, they wouldn't go out to sea. You must know that this is the confrontation between the Navy headquarters and the four emperors. The process is naturally very intense, and it really makes them emotional and hard to let go. They are not people who keep their own feet. If they were, they would not go out to sea and become pirates. In addition to the attitude of watching, they also thought a little excitedly about this kind of thing happening on the sea. After all, can Whitebeard save Fire Fist Ace? Even some pirates have launched a casino with countless ways to play. As long as they dare to buy, they will have corresponding compensation from Barry, as well as multiples of compensation and so on. Come and buy. This time, the Whitebeard wins. The odds are 3 for 1. Forget it, I still have to buy the Navy headquarters. Since they have all held posters, of course, they must be well informed. No, it's just that the odds of a victory for the Navy are pitifully low. I think it's possible to buy a tie. A tie? Are you kidding? There is no tie in this kind of war. Quote. A group of people were shouting loudly, making a lot of noise. At this time, the Chambord Islands had fewer and fewer troops. Because of the abnormal war that followed, the remaining naval soldiers here were basically close to zero. Even if there is still a little bit left, I don't dare to suddenly attack the pirates in this situation. This is undoubtedly the predicament of self-destruction and no life. Therefore, many navies on the island have decided to shrink in the branch buildings and stay at home, waiting for the war to be over and the Navy's military strength to recover before restoring the previous order. Within one of the area codes of the Chambord Islands. Chachi's ripping off. In the tavern. A group of pirates are frantically drinking wine and eating meat. Their faces are so happy, their faces are flushed, and they are chatting roaringly, enjoying themselves. The whole pub was very lively. The location of the front desk. Chachi's face was calm, holding a cigarette and exhaling heavily. Her eyes were a little bright. During this time, the number of the Navy was decreasing. Moreover, the number of pirates is increasing rapidly, which is naturally a good situation in her opinion. The more pirates there are, the better her business will be. Otherwise, like the previous time, the tavern was deserted, but it would be uncomfortable. Chapter 259_Planner. Profit. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 43 and GT. Otherwise, like the previous time, the tavern was deserted, but it would be uncomfortable. At the door, an old man with silver hair walked step by step. There was a scar on his eye, which ran across the entire eye from top to bottom. He also had eyes and held a fishing rod. Rayleigh walked to the front desk and said with a smile, "Today is very rich, 6 fish. Not enough to fill your stomach." Chachi rolled her eyes and said bluntly, "Ha ha." Rayleigh laughed, his appetite has never been small. At this time, the sound of a group of pirates talking in the tavern also reached their ears. The Navy headquarters has officially issued a battle report with the Whitebeard pirates. It just depends on whether Whitebeard should stand. If we fight, this battle will be a real war. No, Firefist Ace was arrested and is about to be executed. Thinking about it, Whitebeard shouldn't watch his son be killed without doing anything. It's not like his style. That's right, this war, I think, is unavoidable. Quote. Rayleigh and Chachi's expressions became dull, and they looked at each other in shock. I didn't get the news ahead of time. Chachi took a deep breath and said flatly. Her news network, there is no way to know this news in advance. It can be said that she is also a little scared. It is conceivable that the naval headquarters this time has taken strict measures to prevent the disclosure of information. This made Chachi feel heavier. This situation, it seems, is really true. Whitebeard, Navy headquarters. Rayleigh frowned and muttered to himself. These two, he has also charged no less than 10 times, both are old opponents. Especially Whitebeard, Warring States, and Garp. Now, they are about to break out a war that sweeps the sea, which makes him feel a little heavy. Once this kind of war occurs, I am afraid that the sea will not be peaceful. It's true. 470. After a long time, Chachi hung up the phone bug, looked at Rayleigh, and said solemnly. At this moment, Rayleigh's face changed completely, and he couldn't help himself for a long time. After recovering, he shook his head and sighed heavily. This kind of war, even he did not expect. Wait. Suddenly, Chachi's pupils shrank and she lost her voice. Rayleigh, do you remember what this guy Liang said to us before? Well. Rayleigh's face changed greatly, recalling what Liang had said to the two of them before. At that time, they didn't take it to heart at all, and they can't even recall it now. But after hearing the words of the group of pirates, what Liang said to them at that time came to mind again, and it became extremely dazzling, which shocked both of them. Exactly, what's the situation? The corner of Rayleigh's mouth moved slightly, he took a deep breath, and said, why did he get the news in advance? I'm afraid, before Firefist Ace was captured, he said this to us. Could it be that he can you really see the future? I don't feel it's simple, or, in this case, he is the mastermind at all. Chachi's eyes gradually enlarged, and the waves in her heart rolled. Planner. Prophet. Which of the two is the real one? But no matter which one, the terror level of the other party is far beyond their imagination. NLT, 44 and GT. Chapter 260 Reactions from all parties. New World. On a mysterious island. The people of the red-haired pirates, burning the fire, are queuing for a carnival. The co-captain with a long gun, Ben Beckman, looked at the red hair, holding a poster. His eyes twinkled, and he whispered, "Boss, are we going?" Navy headquarters, Whitebeard. Red-haired Shanks was lost in thought. The surrounding atmosphere was depressed. There was no sound, waiting for the redhead's reply. Really? Things did not surprise him. Fire Fist Ace, after all, lost to this guy Tick. Instead, he was sent to the Navy headquarters. This guy, Titch, clearly wants the two to go to war. What exactly is he drawing? The redhead frowned, completely unable to understand Blackbeard Titch's thoughts. However, he can be sure that Blackbeard Titch definitely has ulterior secrets and conspiracies. Otherwise, he spent so much effort to send Fire Fist Ace to the Navy headquarters, which can explain a lot of problems. He wanted to watch the two go to war, and there must be a reason why he did so. In this war, what role does Titch play? Has he become Chihuahua? The redhead's face became more and more gloomy, his eyes twinkled brightly, and finally he said, "Let's slow down a little bit and see what this guy Titch is going to do. No matter what he has to do, the tragedy of this war will be tragic. At that time, we can also play and end the game." After speaking, the redhead closed his eyes slightly and fell into deep thought. No one disturbed his thinking. Under this circumstance, the redhead's behavior is normal. At this time, the red hair is constantly thinking about many things. Whitebeard, definitely rescue Ace. But since the Navy headquarters has been publicly executed, how could it not prevent the attack of the Whitebeard pirates? In this way, both sides are prepared to fight, and the final result will naturally be tragic. No matter which side wins, it is a tragic victory, and there is no such thing as a completely repressive victory. Either the Whitebeard pirates or the Navy headquarters. Their strength is recognized, and each side is very tyrannical. The turmoil brought by the strong duel is self-evident. Also, Tiki. The redhead's main target was Blackbeard, and he wanted to know the specific reason for the other party's actions. The Fire Fist Ace was given to the Navy headquarters, obviously for the two to go to war. His purpose is very unusual. Are you going to kill Whitebeard? This is undeniable. It is impossible for Whitebeard to let this fellow Tiki go, so Tiki will do whatever it takes to use Fire Fist Ace to guide the war to the Navy headquarters to resist his own pressure. No, not right. This guy, Titch, is not only thinking so simply, he must have other conspiracies. The redhead was in a mess, and was sorting out a lot of things, but in any case, before Blackbeard didn't act, he couldn't know what the other party's specific purpose was. He could only figure it out, trying to figure out Blackbeard's plan. But the result is still empty. This guy, Titch, is thoughtful, and everything he does has a purpose. However, it is quite difficult to think about the purpose of the other party. Everything can only be noticed until that time. Lord Kaido, this is the latest poster from the Navy. A pirate looked terrified, lowered his head, looked at the burly giant in front of him, and said in a low voice. This giant is tall and burly, with black hair and a shawl, a pair of horns, a long beard like a dragon's beard on his mouth, and a scale tattoo on his left arm. He was naked on the upper body, with a purple shirt hanging from his waist, and wearing dark green wide trousers on the lower body, with a tie around his waist. Like an ancient demon. One of the four emperors, the captain of the beast pirates, the beast Kaido. Say. Chapter 260 The reactions of all parties. NLT, 45 and GT. Say. Kaido's face was calm, and he said lightly. He was absent-minded, thinking about which place to go to continue to seek death as the best choice. Navy headquarters, the captain of the 2nd Division under Whitebeard, Fire Fist Ace, will be publicly executed. This little pirate brother lowered his head and told the truth. Well. Kaido raised his brows, showing a strange smile, and said, Whitebeard, are you going to collide with the Navy headquarters? How can such a lively thing be without me? Pass my order. Kaido looked at the younger brother in front of him and shouted, pay close attention to every move of the Whitebeard pirates. I'm just about to fight him. Yes, Lord Kaido. The little pirate brother quickly left. In this empty cave, Kaido was the only one left, thinking about things. The air was full of blood. At a glance, there were countless corpses lying on the ground under his feet, wreckage everywhere, and blood was flowing on the ground like a river. And he, like a demon god, stood on the pile of corpses, motionless, completely ignoring the people who died below him. Here, he captured an island, and the people who died were also those who blocked him, and they were all torn apart by him, no exception. Whitebeard. Kaido murmured to himself, his eyes twinkling brightly, his expression full of fighting intent. Coincidentally, taking advantage of this opportunity, it is completely possible to fight against Whitebeard. At this moment, the Whitebeard has no time to take care of me. If this is the case, then your territory belongs to me. Thinking of this, he laughed out loud, kicked out, and countless corpses exploded, turning into blood mist, flying all over the sky, dyeing the walls of the entire cave red. The wild laughter echoed in this cave, making people's scalp numb, and they dared not approach. At the entrance of the cave, the two guards had goosebumps all over their bodies, and a deep sense of fear flashed through their eyes that could not be concealed. Lord Kaido is sick again. The two looked at each other and subconsciously moved away from the hole. After the two left. Boom. The entire cave was reduced to rubble, burying Kaido himself in the rubble. See. The expressions of the two guards were even more frightened, with lingering fears in their hearts. Fortunately, they ran fast, otherwise, they would have died in the ruins in front of them. Boom. With another loud noise, Kaido crawled out of the ruins. His face was calm, except for the dust on his body. There was no trace of scars. He walked to Qian Haohao, two guards, and said, prepare, go. Yes, Lord Kaido. ... Blue sky. In the sun. A gigantic pirate ship sails the seas of the New World. This ship is called the Moby Dick. On board. Whitebeard was expressionless, and he held the poster in his hand. The originally lively ship has become very depressing. Daddy. Marco looked at Whitebeard and said solemnly. Behind him, many captains are ready, just waiting for Whitebeard's order. Dad. Many captains shouted loudly, looking at Whitebeard in unison, their voices loud and clear. Dare to do something to my son. Whitebeard stood up, tall and straight, his eyes looked at the sky in the distance, and shouted, boys, let's go save Ace now. Save Ace. Save Ace. ...